February 12th, 2020. Police sniper teams take aim from the rooftops of downtown Missoula, Montana. Camouflaged troopers, armed with assault rifles and shotguns, patrol the streets.
Police cars blocked roadways and officers manned the area with machine guns. We received reports of shots fired at a police car.
While armored vehicles and paddy wagons sit parked at busy city intersections. Roadblocks seal off the downtown area for over 7 hours.
Armed officers stood by in the street and atop buildings and conducted searches in the area.
A citywide emergency alert warns locals to stay out of the city center and remain indoors until further notice.
Perimeter was immediately established and officers were locked down, all those government offices as well.
8 different agencies are mobilized, including the FBI and U.S. Marshals. SWAT teams systematically enter and clear building after building in search of something that they'll never find. This footage could easily be from Fallujah, but it's not. How did we get here? Why does my hometown feel more and more like a war zone? Missoula, Montana has many names. The Garden City, Zootown, the city with soul, the 5 valleys through which 3 rivers run and every direction leads to wilderness. Paradise on earth, at least from the outside. Because in the months leading up to the downtown lockdown, a wave of business closures began rocking this otherwise stable community. Countless shop owners directly cited rising property tax costs as the reason for closing their doors. But amid this typhoon of closures, one downtown company seemed to be thriving. There was trouble in Paradise, and his name was Nick Chakota. Chakota's arrival from Wisconsin 7 years prior began his great buy-up of Missoula's most prominent entertainment venues. He became the subject of a heated legal debate regarding his alleged anti-competitive business practices. In just a few years, he'd bought the Wilma and Top Hat, built an amphitheater, secured exclusive booking rights at the baseball stadium, and was constructing similar venues in other cities throughout the state. With his eyes set on dominating the inland Northwest circuit, Missoula's entire entertainment industry had become consolidated into Chakota's hands virtually overnight. It seemed like the last thing this man needed was yet another music venue. But that's exactly what the city leadership were proposing, even providing more than $16 million of taxpayer money to those ends. This was the largest taxpayer giveaway of its kind in the history of the state of Montana, and it was happening behind closed doors at this meeting on October the 16th, 2019.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity for me to present today. Well, most Missoulians know me in the entertainment side of the world, and that's been my background for the last 10 years. Prior to moving to Missoula, I was a real estate developer. I've developed over 1 million square feet of medical space, some of it very complex, and some of the projects pushing the $100 million mark, so I've done projects of this size. This gives you a sense of what a 6,000 person standing concert looks like. Here's a picture of it empty. This gives you a sense of what it looks like seated. Sitting above the hotel is the third component, which is 3 floors of residential condominiums. This is a view from Orange Street, from a bird's eye view from the corner of Front and Orange. Another perspective, to date, not a lot of developments have taken advantage of the river So an entity that we formed, Clark Fork Riverfront Properties, will take assignment. We're an operating business in Missoula that has other streams of income other than just real estate.
Thank you, Mr. Chakota. The speed with which we're bringing this to you has everything to do with seizing opportunity. Ms. Jones?
There is this, wow, this is happening so fast, but for me personally, I don't think that's fast necessarily. I think it's more like closure.
We're fond of circulating rumors in Missoula, and I thought the sooner we could get this in front of the Redevelopment Agency Board, the more facts we would have available to move forward with this project. And the sooner you all can get to a place where you can support this, which I hope you can. If you'd like to comment, please, I'll ask you to keep it as brief as possible. Any public comment?
Thank you, Your Honor, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. But I have some concerns. My concerns really have a lot to do with the optics of this.
Let us know who you are, please.
I'm sorry, my name is Kevin Hunt. I live in Ward 1.
Thank you.
I'm very concerned about the optics of this. I was, I guess, lucky to even find out this hearing was happening today. When I opened the attachment to the announcement and looked at the resolution, it said at the bottom of the resolution, adopted on October 21st, which of course is your regular Monday meeting night. And here we are in midday, in midweek. When it's virtually impossible for working people and other people who have an interest in this project of great magnitude to come in here and have a comment.
You know, this was supposed to be heard on Monday by the entire council, and there was going to be a public hearing, and I accidentally stumbled across this notice that came from the mayor, you know, that this meeting had been accelerated, and here we are 5 days earlier on a Wednesday at 2 in the afternoon.
And when, with all due respect, Mr. Mayor, when I hear it said that, well, rumors get started and we want to get ahead of the rumors and get this done, to me, that's the euphemism for we don't want the comments of the ignorant public to get in the way of what we're trying to do.
And the mayor's response was, well, we had to get ahead of the rumors. And the way to get ahead of the rumors was to take care of this now.
The way to quell rumors is to answer the questions before you vote. These are the kinds of questions that people would be likely to ask from the public if they could get here, if they could come to this meeting, because they can't. With a 75-year lease, is the city facilitating an oligarchy that will eventually wield great influence over city governance for generations to come by owning so many venues?
$16.5 million city subsidy and 75-year monopoly to a family that was going to end the other entertainment venues in town, rip off millions of dollars of revenue the university should have gotten, and so on and so forth.
I hate to say it, but most everybody in this room will be dead by the time the 75 years runs out on this leaseback agreement, including myself. So what is the projected debt service of the conference center?
The debt service will be non-existent other than the TIF bond.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'd assume that you're looking at something in the $15 to $17 million range.
And what are those funds going to be used for? My name is Jesse Ramos. I serve on the Missoula City Council representing Ward 4. I was elected in 2017, but I've been voted best politician and best activist the last 3 years in a row by a wide variety of Missoulians, over 17,000 votes. Moved down to Missoula from Libby, Montana, where I grew up, and I began work as a wealth management advisor, so that's what I do full-time. So where do the proceeds of the lease agreement go once the debt service has been paid off? Where do those actually go? There's a private developer named Nick Chakota, who I don't have any problems with him as a businessman until you start taking taxpayer money.
Although it was said that, quote, general taxes in the community won't be affected, we know that these TIF projects have in fact already drastically increased taxes for some people in this city. The Missoulians have already written articles about what's happening to people like office supply, people who are downtown, locally owned businesses, icons, family businesses who were presented with property tax bills that had suddenly tripled. And because of that, their landlords now are jacking up their rents, and they don't know if they're going to remain in business. And what happens is, a lot of times, these people do go out of business, and then the buildings are snapped up, and they're snapped up by people like this gentleman here at a discount. Often they then end up demolished because they're declared blighted. And then we use more TIF. And what do we do with more TIF? We demolish these buildings, we maybe save a facade or two, and pretty soon Missoula doesn't look like a western town anymore. I want to ask you if that's really forward progress. Maybe some of the riverfront should be left undeveloped and natural, like it was when I grew up here.
And this has been a project that the mayor has wanted to get done for a long time. He's wanted a city-owned conference center.
Chris has certainly been working on this forever, and I've been working on it for some portion of forever.
And there's always been questions about how that would get done, and then those questions were finally answered, not in 2019, but actually in 2017. They first started discussing this issue with a company called the Farron Group here in Missoula.
Along with other partners, including Farron Realty Partners and Hotel Fox Partners.
The objective was the city was going to pay north of $14 million at the time. It later grew to $16 million. For inflationary costs, of course.
Here's a Wisconsin developer that's going to get $16 million.
Chakota's company, the Drift Project, was going to build these hotels, and they were going to build a conference center. The city would then go ahead and reimburse them $16 million, but then they would retain ownership. Along with that, there was a 75-year lease. So this was a long-term deal where it was going to be city-owned, but nobody could use it except for this one developer. So in effect, this development corporation was going to be getting $16 million of taxpayer money to have exclusive use of a facility that size for 75 years. And the argument was, well, they're going to be paying rent to the city. And I said, well, how are they going to be paying rent? And they said, well, with their property taxes. And it's like, wait a minute, how do I get that deal? How can I take my property taxes and use it to benefit a commercial space that I get to use all the time? That doesn't seem right.
This isn't right. This was rescheduled without proper notice. It was done at the last minute. The clerk didn't even know what was going on.
This concerns me a great deal. I don't think it's appropriate to reschedule or hold this at a special meeting.
The city council meeting was altered to where we had a special meeting, and it was moved up, and I'm not really sure the rationale for what that was.
You know, to get ahead of the rumors.
The city, I think, purposely uses forms of communication that the public does not use to notify folks on meetings. I think sometimes you'll have a notification process in the newspaper, or maybe you'll have something on a newspaper's website, but for the most part, you have to dig through the city records and the city agenda. It's not like it's on social media like it is in so many other cities where they actually care about keeping their public informed and they want to reach as many people as possible. The majority of citizens that we represent can't just sneak away on a Wednesday afternoon.
So then when I got done, a couple of these people that were, affiliated in some way with the project got up as if they were just plain citizens and said, well, I work and I'm here and I'm for it.
I'm a charter member of the Engen Republic and I managed to get myself here today.
So I was the only regular citizen there, which the Missoulian parlayed into only one citizen spoke in opposition. Well, there was only one there.
J. Kevin Hunt, he had come back to Missoula. He used to practice law in Oregon, and he was the one that actually caught the change of schedule.
Why is it out of 70,000 people, I'm the only one there? You know there's something wrong right off the bat.
And especially because, it was during the day. So it was moved to during the day on a Wednesday, I believe.
Because this happened on a Wednesday. So the public comment was sought on a Wednesday in the middle of the day.
And a lot of people have to work during the day. A Monday night, that is even a struggle for a lot of people, but it's certainly a lot more doable than a Wednesday afternoon. So that infuriated people a lot more.
The entire public comment period was moved by Mayor Engen.
I had to do this as an emergency because we had to get ahead of the rumors. What rumors?
This is a big deal, and I think that a lot of folks on the council just assumed, okay, this is just the way it's going to go, and we're going to forge ahead on this deal, and it's just going to be a good thing for the city of Missoula.
All right, good evening, everybody. I will call to order City Council meeting for tonight, October 21st, 2019. First item is attendance. Please let the record show Mayor Engen is obviously absent. I'll be presiding in his absence. We'll move on to the public comment portion of the agenda. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that are not elsewhere on the agenda. And if you could please limit your remarks to about 3 minutes or less, that would be great.
The reason this is Big Sky Country is because we do not have tall buildings. Our monuments are not to man, but to nature.
If you believe, as Martin Luther King Jr. did, that budgets are moral documents, then we are obligated to ask ourselves whether it should be our local government's priority to further enrich local tycoons while homelessness in Missoula is now so bad that we have billboards announcing the exact number of homeless children all over our town.
And for some reason, the Missoulian has heard an awful rumor that people in Missoula strongly support and encourage the taxpayer giveaway of over $16 million to a Wisconsinite millionaire.
And a Wisconsinite that apparently wants to transform Missoula into Austin, Texas.
Many of us before you now are from Missoula and were born here, but somehow have less agency over how our tax dollars are going to be spent because of the constant misuse and abuse of tax increment financing.
Tax increment financing schemes that serve as corporate giveaways highlight how politicians often hide where tax money is actually being spent.
The question is whether you represent the people or the money.
And the Missoulian acts like there's only one crazy guy in this whole town who opposes this development. So Hunt's questions are our questions.
Hunt's questions are our questions.
Hunt questioned why TIF funding wasn't used for badly needed affordable housing, and that's something I asked myself.
Hunt said that raising property tax causes people to move out of buildings, which causes them to be demolished, and then the area is declared blighted, thereby necessitating the use for even more TIF.
Developers love this cycle of destruction because it's good for them, but it's bad for everyone else.
TIF money was used to help enrich Peter Lambrose at Southgate Mall, and now TIF money is being used again to further enrich Nick Chakota.
And if you don't understand that, or if you're profiting from it, which I hope not, then you're not fit to represent Missoulians.
Forcing Montanans to further enrich an obscenely wealthy Wisconsinite is just plain wrong.
Again, I'll quote Kevin Hunt. Is it in the public interest to cede virtual monopoly on major cultural entertainment events to one entity?
There are already enough concert venues in this town owned and operated by Nick Monopoly Chakota, and now he wants more. It's somehow never enough.
But Hunt's criticism was not limited to this riverfront development and Nick's entitlement to public money, but also to the mayor's decision to suddenly move the council vote from today, right now, to last Wednesday.
The city council must also account for the appearance that this vote was rushed and hidden, moved ahead of schedule with little reason or notice.
What's even worse, the reasoning for abruptly fast-tracking the meeting on this issue couldn't be more self-contradictory. You were trying to avoid rumors.
Hiding a city council vote on this very important issue is an absolutely terrible way to dispel troublesome rumors and increase voter confidence.
It almost seems like Nick Chakota has bought the town.
Well, the mayor certainly spurred more rumors than he quelled with this underhanded rescheduling of the meeting.
The issue now is not whether this development is good for the community. The issue now is that you're installing the most significant development projects in our city's history without the opinions of the people whose property taxes will go to pay for this.
And that, I think, triggered a lot more citizen participation in future meetings, which I thought was a very good thing. I can't speak for the rest of my fellow council members who probably didn't enjoy it as much, hearing from members of the public that weren't necessarily on their side.
I started asking myself, why we vote for you people?
So now we're asking you, City Council, to take note of the fact that your community is not okay with this application of tax increment financing.
Your community doesn't oppose this project because that language is far too soft to even remotely reflect just how much your community loathes the very idea of this project.
The city wants me and my neighbors to pay for this Wisconsin millionaire's fancy new eyesore, a venue that we don't need, don't want, and shouldn't be talking about.
The fact that we're even having this conversation infuriates us beyond your imagination.
The issue now is that you tried to sneak this past the Montanans that you represent.
My dear City Council, what you've really communicated to us here last week, us the community, is that you don't care about us.
Montana has a lot of history with this. We've gone from copper kings, robber barons, to hotel tycoon robber barons, to concert venue robber barons.
Entertaining wealthy tourists at all costs may be Nick Chakota's prime directive, but it is not shared by the rest of the people who are actually from here.
It's all a big party for you, but none of the locals paying for it share any enthusiasm for it.
We didn't consent to this, and we are well aware that Missoula has a consent issue. After all, Krakauer wrote a book about us because of it.
Too often, TIFs are used to justify projects that we, the stupid public, aren't supposed to be able to understand. Here's a clue. If you can't explain tax collection schemes to the people you're taking them from, then you shouldn't be doing them at all.
Help us put an end to our consent problems, so I'll say it again. We, the community, that you want to pay for this, do not consent to it. It will not improve our lives. It would only burden us with more debt that could be spent in far more imaginative ways, better ways.
But politicians continue to use their archaic, pre-digital excuse that government business is just too complicated for the public to witness to. If that's true, then we have a major problem.
These kinds of shenanigans are why people have lost faith in democratic government, because crony capitalism so often amounts to little more than organized crime.
The Chakotay deal and the politics and shenanigans and propaganda surrounding it help make perfectly clear that tax increment financing regulations require immediate and drastic amendments.
A huge number of Missoulians are struggling worse than ever to make ends meet, but it seems that all the city can do is squeeze already desperate taxpayers for just a little more in perpetuity.
Nick Chakotay is already obviously wealthy, and you want to line his pockets with our money.
But thank God we have all these music venues to get drunk at so we can forget what a dumpster fire our town's turning into, right?
If Austin is so great, then you go there. Don't bring your big city problems to our small town. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. When in Missoula, you have goddamn respect for the people who live here.
If the policies of the mayor and the city council benefit the extremely wealthy elite business owners and out-of-town hotel chains at the detriment of the overall citizenry, then what recourse do the people of Missoula have other than to exercise their electoral power and call for a change in the staffing of the city council?
And if these issues are not addressed satisfactorily, then we will have no recourse but to clean house and elect new representatives.
We have here an absentee ballot for the Missoula City Council election taking place on November 5th.
The choice is entirely yours. Because if we, the people, continue to allow plutocrats to steal everything that isn't nailed down, then we alone guarantee our collective fate will involve our continuing subservience to bullies, thieves, and liars. We owe our children better than that, and we owe nothing to Nick Chakotay.
My name is Brandon Bryant. My family's been very big in the community. So my great-grandpa, the minister, built 89 churches across the United States, ended up retiring here in Missoula. My uncle coached in the 90s at Hellgate. My grandpa came out of retirement and coached Big Sky and Frenchtown when I was going to school there. My mom taught at Frenchtown and then now teaches at Big Sky.
Oh, wow.
You can ask anyone that's been here if they know the Bryants, and they'll say yeah. And in 2019, I just kept hearing people talking about rent going up. I listened to them complain about how hard it is to work, how hard it is to just survive. But I felt their pain. You know, Missoula has a very special place for me, and what they've done to it is just...
It's really hard in Missoula still to see the changes that are happening. It makes it harder and harder and harder for people that were born here to continue living here. And people don't have any clue how many people are living in their cars.
And in Missoula, it's really bad because we're an education city. Okay. After the rape scandals in the university, what happens? Nick Chakotay comes in and destroys the local music scene. Nick Chakotay is probably the biggest bastard in this place. And he was going to build a penthouse in the middle of the city. So in October, I was frustrated with that as well. So I started going to the city council meetings.
Move on to the public comment portion of our agenda, and we'll keep those comments to 3 minutes, please. Any general public comment tonight? Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Brandon Bryant. I am a local Missoulian, Staff Sergeant in the United States military.
I served for 8 years in the U.S. Army Infantry.
Maybe it doesn't matter that our city is being gentrified, transformed into a corporate nightmare.
But just like so many other vets who volunteered to defend their communities, we're returning home to find those communities have been sold to the rich by our civilian neighbors.
Maybe it doesn't matter that our representatives are helping them to do it.
Returning veterans are trying to integrate back into a society only to find that we're integrating into a burning house.
And in a community which is becoming increasingly unemployed and more financially insecure, I'm guessing our suicide rate will also increase.
As you probably are already well aware, Montana has the highest suicide rate in the United States.
The way veterans can be treated here, it's depressing and upsetting.
But it's not just vets who kill ourselves. Of the dozens of comrades, friends, and acquaintances I have personally buried, a good deal of them never served in the military, because we here in the great state of Montana have the highest suicide rate in the country.
The vast majority of jobs start at an average wage of under $15 per hour, but the cost of living grows to become more and more astronomical.
Economic desperation contributes significantly to rising suicide statistics and demonstrates how most of us are barely making it in this community.
According to experts, housing should only make up 28% of our total monthly household expenses.
All it takes is a push. Have you been to the food bank lately? I have. And what shocks me when I'm down there is how many homeowners I see when I'm down there. And they're the ones most embarrassed to ask for help because they have work, they have a mortgage, they have degrees, they did everything right.
Many Americans tolerate inequality only because they overestimate their odds of coming out on top.
And they're barely getting by, and that's most people in this community. And these rising tax rates only squeeze them of the tiny amount of prosperity they have left.
More and more of us are realizing the truth than ever before.
And maybe we shouldn't worry. After all, more jobs will open up when, people kill themselves, right?
We're being buried. And so many of the friends that I have buried who decided to put a gun in their mouth or their neck through a noose, one thing they all have in common is they lost hope and they were broke at the end.
And if rents and housing costs were all that were skyrocketing while wages stagnate, people might be able to find a way to make it work, even given the way rent has skyrocketed.
No one plans for their retirement years to be spent sleeping on a mat on the floor of an overcrowded homeless shelter. But here in our liberal utopia, that is increasingly what's happening. It's being exacerbated by the mayor's use of TIF money like this as a personal slush fund.
Cities have taken to enticing developers and real estate investors with geo bribes.
The most egregious example of this is, of course, the taxpayer giveaway scheme known as Tax Increment Financing.
One of the most egregious examples is Tax Increment Financing.
Geo bribes like Tax Increment Financing.
And it makes me think that TIF is just another scam for shifting what should be public funds to private interests.
The council started to have some citizens show up, some very active, engaged citizens that understood the issues, and that infuriated the people in charge.
I'm calling for an investigation into the ethical conduct of the city council, as well as the mayor and everyone involved in the TIF projects that are going on in this city.
So I ask you to look at this podium and admire its transparency, and every time you look at it, just think, how can I be more transparent about this issue?
They are used to not having to be held accountable. They're used to being able to brush people off with just an empty platitude or an emotional argument. They're not used to people actually doing the hard work that it takes.
Because tax increment financing is too complicated to understand? We should all sleep tight because our money's in good hands?
Now, the mayor threatens to further line the pockets of Wisconsin millionaire Nick Jakota with more than $16 million in tax increment financing. It turns out that all the controversial TIF developments have one thing in common. Their owners all contributed to Mayor Engen's campaign.
Go back to bed because the representatives have everything under control?
Just pay John and you can screw the taxpayers all you want.
There's nothing to see here? No massive multi-million-dollar giveaway?
If we can afford to give Nick Jakota $16 million, we can afford to fix our potholes and address poverty.
Handing over Missoula's sovereignty to a Wisconsin millionaire is not helping alleviate suicide in your community. You're throwing fuel in a dumpster fire, and that fuel is alcohol.
Spirit as in alcohol, of course. Sometimes that contributes negatively to suicide rates in Montana, which is still #1 in the nation for suicide statistics, but nevertheless, one of Nick Jakota's primary profit drives is alcohol sales.
When you add more and more of these TIFs, it might seem good in the short term, but what you're really doing is selling our children's future down the Clark Fork River.
It's a big party every night in the week at the halls of downtown, but it's not a party for we the community who pay for it.
Those of us who are from Missoula don't think it needs to be redeveloped. as though everyone should be striving to achieve the same standard of homogenized corporate world order.
Yeah, and to be honest, I was kind of taken aback by the amount of commentary we had, not just the amount, but the quality of the commentary. I was sitting there thinking, wow, these guys actually did their homework, they were responsible, they understood how tax increment financing worked, and they were speaking intelligently about it, and understood TIF more than the majority of the council members.
TIFs lie at the very heart of what Bernie Sanders is talking about when he mentions privatized gains and socialized losses.
The city is responsible for making the bondholders whole, whether the area is profitable or not. Meanwhile, if it is profitable, the developer accrues most of that windfall, save whatever they pay in taxes, and another neighborhood is dramatically gentrified.
Nick Chikota should be required to put money back into our community that he's exploiting. But it seems to me, Mayor, that we've chosen to line his pockets with our taxpayer money. And a whole lot of energy has been spent trying to convince Missoulians that that's not what's happening.
I think the majority of the council members put their trust in the bureaucrats and the mayor and the other various people, and they don't do that research on their own that's so key to being an effective leader.
As we all know, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem tends to look like a nail. And the Missoula Redevelopment Agency continues to smash the community of Missoula apart with the overwhelming destructive power of tax increment financing, the most asinine corporate giveaway scheme since Wall Street derivatives.
So before you unconsciously thank me for my service, keep in mind how you might be influencing suicide statistics in this area with tax increment financing.
The people you're screwing over are the people you depend on, the people who cook your meals, haul your trash, connect your calls, drive your ambulances, and who guard you while you sleep. And they are not happy.
And that sort of sparked what became a very contentious time period here in this town.
If you openly support tax increment financing, then you are openly declaring yourself an enemy of the people.
If you support tax increment financing, you're openly declaring yourself an enemy of the people.
So they reacted in the same way that they reacted when I was elected to the council. It works so much better when they have everybody in unison and they can paint everything as one clean, bright picture. I could tell they looked at disdain with a lot of the people that were commenting.
The only local funding source that the city of Missoula has used to subsidize affordable housing are MRA funds.
They had that same disdain for folks that were speaking against what they believed in, that they did for the folks that were speaking out against the taxes or anybody that goes against the grain. I caused quite a bit of a stir my first year on council, where I had 300 people show up to the council chambers, the most widely attended meeting in council history, to speak on the budget, and that meeting actually lasted till 3:30 in the morning. And the vast majority of those folks there did not support the budget, the tax hike. They talked about personal stories, even people from Habitat for Humanity homes. They were getting taxed out of their homes. And the meeting lasted till 3 in the morning, and the council at that point hated my guts.
During citizen comment time at a city council meeting, members of the public they are allowed to comment on things on the consent agenda before they're voted on, which is good.
It's our right to go to the elected officials and to make public comments when they are making decisions that really impact people's lives. And so that continued happening week after week after week.
The rest of the council could deal with them coming for 1 or 2 weeks, and then away they go. But these other gentlemen that were coming, and gentlemen and ladies that were coming and speaking about TIF, were persistent.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll call the Missoula City Council meeting of November 4th, 2019 to order. And we'll move on to the public comment portion of our agenda. This is your opportunity to comment on items not elsewhere on the agenda. Any general public comment? Yes, sir.
Howdy, Daniel Cernick. I've lived in Missoula about 10 combined years. I'm right in the hot zone here of what's being spoken about. So I have an interesting perspective as a local business owner. At the corner of Orange and Broadway, I run TechWorks. It's me, the one-man show taken over by my brother, started it about 8 years ago, veteran, that we lost way too early. Knowing that my building's going to be torn down has been fine with me for the most part, because I know that places need to be torn down and rebuilt. The perspective I'm coming from here is I love this town and its quirks and its historic value.
We see bumper stickers urging us to keep Missoula weird. We propose the new goal should be to keep Missoula affordable.
But with the constant giveaway of tax increment financing to large outside money interests, those who call Missoula home might not be able to do so for much longer.
I find it disturbing when I look around that many of the people I've seen downtown, many of the businesses I've seen downtown for many years, are having to move out or close entirely.
It's an awesome place, being on the corner of Orange and Broadway, but I think given a guy that's already got a strong foothold in entertainment, you know, the keys to having all of it is a little much.
There are ethical questions here when some people are benefiting very well while others are being asked to simply remove themselves and leave.
I want to grow with this community, and I think it's important to remember where we come from. There's 3 things you're not late for in Montana. That's work, church, and fishing. I've had a hard time going to work in the shadow of a looming future. I don't know. My girlfriend's leaving for better business opportunities, and I'm probably leaving when TechWorks gets torn down. I've known that the whole time, and I'm grateful for what I have.
I don't think it's correct that some people are benefiting so much and others have to walk away.
We're being taxed out of our homes and businesses.
The landlord I have, whose parents built and managed the apartment I currently live in, had to sell to other interests due to rising property taxes.
Renters are affected also, since skyrocketing property taxes require landlords and slumlords to continuously raise rents.
I am now directly affected in a negative way by the gentrification going on in our town due to tax increment financing.
They did not quit, and as they started understanding the parliamentary procedure, they started knowing how to read the agenda and seeing what other issues are on there. That's stuff that only comes with practice or being an elected official. It's not easy to just pull up the city agenda and navigate that like they make you think. So in order to be an engaged citizen, you have to be a dedicated citizen, and you have to put a lot of time, energy, and effort into doing this. So it's a big sacrifice to be a dedicated citizen and to be a responsible citizen, and these guys, they exemplified that.
I just want to tell you all that we were pleased and excited to learn that the council responded directly to our concerns at the previous meeting.
We would like to say to the council that we are merely what we appear to be. We're a group of concerned citizens who believe that the city's large-scale development projects using tax increment financing are unfairly benefiting the very wealthy at the cost of the taxpayers. Our premise is very, very simple.
After our last 2 sessions of public comment, we've had the opportunity to learn more and more about tax increment financing.
We understand that the Riverfront Triangle project was approved years ago. We understand that the vote on October 16th, which we have been so vocal about, was only a minor amendment to the terms of that already existing contract.
It is now too late for discussions of how the Riverfront Triangle project may or may not benefit the people of Missoula. That ship has sailed.
And while we clearly don't approve of it, we recognize that it will likely move forward regardless of any actions taken by us or by the City Council.
For now, let us say that the $16 million is the largest TIF giveaway in the history of our state.
We understand that this is already a done deal.
And we ask that it also be the last.
Though we also understand that upon the project's completion, the City Council will still have a vote on whether to fulfill the $16 million bond.
Well, they'd clearly put in the time, the effort, and they spoke about TIF, sure, but when there were other issues that came up that they didn't agree with, and by the way, I agreed with some of those issues that they were disagreeing with, they would speak out against those in a very educated way.
So what is our purpose here if not to oppose and protest the Riverfront Triangle?
All we're asking is that the City Council take a hard look at the pattern presented here and elsewhere when tax increment financing is leveraged to the benefit of the very wealthy.
We intend to open a dialogue with the relevant parties as to the possible consequences and historical patterns of tax increment financing.
They understood the parliamentary procedure on when you're supposed to speak. They always honored the 3 minutes and were very polite and respectful during the City Council meetings.
Bring a history lesson from California. In 2011, Governor Jerry Brown had to shutter the state's 400 redevelopment agencies after negative press and budgetary shortfalls caused an outcry from the public.
For these reasons, Governor Brown ended them in 2011.
We took particular note of Councilman von Lossberg's point that TIF money has also contributed to a notable construction of low-income housing in the city.
One of the major failings was with affordable housing.
We don't need to build affordable housing, we need to make existing housing affordable.
Even these types of development strategies fail.
120 municipalities combined to spend $700 million on housing and never produced a single unit.
To build affordable housing, existing homes were often demolished, but because of the construction process was so slow, this new housing wasn't built, creating an even worse shortage than before.
And often land ostensibly set aside for public housing was gifted to commercial interests and never used for any sort of public development whatsoever.
Through this process, we've all started to gain a much clearer concept of the details of tax increment financing, and it's our hope that through continued dialogue, we can help spread greater understanding amongst everyone, including the members of the City Council.
And it's important that if we're going to follow this course, we don't make the same mistakes that California has made.
City Council, you're welcome to price the Missoula citizens out of your town, but I can tell you that those who can afford to live here will not start occupying the newly abandoned houses and apartments once lived in by the poor and middle class.
One of the grim realities that emerges in studying the history of tax increment financing is that while every city or community begins it with good intentions, the whole scheme eventually comes under the control of the very wealthy and is manipulated to their almost exclusive benefit.
California's RDAs were started in 1945 as an effort to combat urban blight. They function through tax increment funding, which we've described ad nauseum here. Long story short, that after decades of operation, this funding model has proven to be a California pipe dream. Matt Wardell. I came from the East Coast, was born in New York, went to school in Pennsylvania. I've been here for 4 years, almost 5. It was never ever my intention to go and confront the city council with a group of citizens. Projects routinely underperform. These agencies wound up actually consuming 12% of the state's property tax revenues.
The agencies had stripped $40 billion from public education, causing a bailout from the state's general fund.
No wonder we have a rising homeless problem.
Another veteran I met last night on the streets of Missoula, I found.
The lower and middle class people living and working in our town are struggling.
Great fellow, probably has a lot of PTSD, didn't have any socks, phone, blankets, nothing, so he has those now.
And you, City Council, feel that the best way to help is to increase property taxes through gentrification.
Trying to build our way out of recession for the sake of the corporate entertainment industry does not set Missoula up for success in the future.
While tax increment financing may have once been a useful tool for investing in the middle class, the sheer size of the latest giveaway is evidence enough that this scheme has passed beyond our control.
I'd like to call on Nick Jacoby to perhaps just not accept the TIF money and just allow Missoula to use that for better purposes.
I would like to ask, in light of earlier comments, if you guys didn't think maybe $16 million wouldn't be better spent on a mental health facility. The one project in particular I was going against was Nick Chicota's new project at the Riverfront Track.
So I think you're talking about the Drift project.
The Drift. He's got the drift of things, he does. Getting the city to pay $17 million to a guy who already has millions of dollars to build a private, luxury hotel, restaurant, concert venue, which only out-of-towners are really going to use, is not an appropriate use.
I just know that if there's going to be a lot of money given that doesn't make a whole lot of sense where it's going, maybe we could allocate a way to synergize with the grassroots folks and give them a little space.
The enrichment will go to a handful of private individuals, and sure, the city will recoup as it's meant to, but the uses are meant to benefit the people who live here, not who vacation here.
As there are many, many people that are, quite frankly, upset, fed up, and about out of options.
The moneyed class has a great deal of time and resources to dedicate to the pursuit of money. In many cases, the manipulation of currency is literally all they're good at, but they're very, very good at it.
I was watching people get up and expressing their concerns about what's going on and the struggles that they were going to, and every single city council member ignored them.
So you have your 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's 3 minutes. And that's 3 minutes. And that's 3 minutes. Thank you, sir.
The range of response from the city council, with maybe 2 exceptions, were disinterest to outright malice, disdain and anger that this lowly peasant should deign to come and speak to me.
I think it's morally questionable that a body exists,
We're
and
about
an
4
unelected
minutes.
body exists that is able to designate who the winners and who the losers are, it seems very un-American to me.
For so long, it was just a giant monolith on that body, and a monolith of the people that body recruited to come to city council meetings.
I wanted to briefly thank the folks in the audience who've been coming down the last 3 weeks now, dedicating your guys' time to speak to us about something that's clearly bothering you guys, and I think something that's very worth a discussion. And I think because of the work of these citizens, we've had more dialogue about this than I've ever heard in the community.
Most citizens, the only way that they know about what's happening on the city council is members of the council will tell them to come and tell their friends and show up to an issue. And before me, nobody was showing up to anything except for what the majority wanted.
In my point of view, you guys are all great Americans, and truly you are patriotic. I mean, we have Brandon Bryant in the audience who had the courage not only to come to here and keep talking to us. Brandon also blew the whistle in 2012 on some stuff in the military that's really, it should have never happened. A violation of numerous civil liberties, both domestic and foreign.
Brandon Bryant joined the U.S. Air Force straight out of college. He was picked to join one of the United States' most controversial and important military programs, drones, to hunt down and kill some of America's most dangerous enemies. The experience has left him haunted and angry.
You've written that you thought you killed a child as well.
He spoke in front of the United Nations, and his service to the country has just been incredible.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brandon Bryant is a former drone operator.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for having me. As a former RPA drone operator, I have concern about how the drone community operates.
One of the first U.S. drone pilots to speak out. Former Air Force pilot Brandon Bryant served as a sensor operator for the U.S. Air Force Predator program from 2007 to 2011.
When I started out, I was flying conventional forces for the 15th Reconnaissance Squadron, and then I ended up in Joint Special Operation Command, JSOC.
JSOC, yeah.
The Joint Special Operations Command. It was designed as the most covert unit in the military, and the only one that reports directly to the White House.
As an Air Force drone operator, in a new article in GQ magazine, Confessions of a Drone Warrior by Matt Power. He joins us now in our New York studio. Brandon Bryant, welcome to Democracy Now!
When I blew the whistle, I was given the Whistleblower Award in 2015, the same award that was awarded to Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden.
Oh, wow.
Okay?
Wow. By
the German Federation of Scientists and the League of International Lawyers Against Nuclear Arms.
Mm-hmm. And so you come back here. Tax increment financing seems like a long ways away from doing the kind of whistleblowing and bringing attention to what was going on.
Correct.
Half a world away.
I've spoken on the world stage in front of the United Nations, and I am distraught to find the same corruption that I have found that I whistleblew against in front of the entire world to be in my own backyard.
I never thought I was going to spend my military retirement fighting against corruption in my own home, but here we are, surrounded by the hopelessness of what neoliberalism delivers to working families. Austerity, debt, and corruption.
And I think that for too long we've had politicians on both sides that lie to their constituents, they mislead their constituents, they tell them half-truths, and they abuse that trust that the people give to them, and they're able to manipulate their constituents with emotional arguments, and they never actually have to understand the facts on the ground that go into governing.
Another thing that I've heard time and time again.
Mr. Ramos, all of this is valid. You need to make a referral so you can have a conversation with your colleagues about this in a meeting.
Fair enough.
Where everyone else can talk as well.
Fair enough.
And the city council was doing the same thing that my military leadership were doing. It was just like a game to them. It was just theater. That's all it was.
The government in general operates best in the dark. They appreciate it when they can just shove things through and they don't have a dissenter in the elected body, and they don't have engaged citizenry to see those various things they're trying to sneak in there and sneak past the public. So it infuriates them. The people in charge hate it when the citizens and other elected leaders call them out on stuff that otherwise they could have just skated through.
And so what put tax increment financing on your radar, so to speak?
My mom lost her apartment for some reason.
A lot of the old folks are gone, playing out. They just had to leave.
Very many of my friends have had to leave due to the economy and the inability to actually make a living here.
My mom had to move.
Rents were, half or a third what they are.
I had to move.
And I mean, rent has doubled, tripled.
We have a fiduciary duty to the citizens because at the end of the day, the citizens are trusting you to handle their money that they have no choice whether or not to give you, lest they get kicked out of their home and evicted and held at gunpoint.
A lot of the problems we're having with, and I hate to use the term because it's so overused and misused, but gentrification that we're having here are because taxes are disproportionately levied on residents, and we give sweetheart deals to people like Nick Shikoda, whose money is mostly out of state, and as I understand in his case, a lot of it overseas.
These are the 1%ers whose median income in Missoula is $1.355 million, which is now more than 40% of the Missoula population, making Missoula number 33 out of every city in the United States for wealth inequality. Shocking figure for you if we didn't cover it before. That's as against a population-wide median of 57,000, but 1/3 of this population of us struggles under $23,000 a year.
These are the kind of things I think that the council should be focused on, not building playhouses for rich people.
So they're not doing anything illegal. They're doing something I consider immoral, but it's not illegal. It's allowed to happen. And to be honest, I never voted for Nick Shikoda, and nobody voted for Nick Shikoda. He doesn't make the rules. The people that I am most disgusted with are the elected officials where the citizens have put their trust and confidence in them, and they let these private developers and private corporations get away with it. It's the elected officials that we need to focus on and we need to hold accountable for their actions.
And during my birthday that year, November 18th.
November 18th, 2019 to order. We'll move on to the public comment portion of our agenda, and we're going to stick to 3 minutes this evening.
So I gave them a parable that I thought expressed the scenario we're in.
The city has a problem with affordable housing. This problem is amplified by gentrification. And while it's technically true that TIFs don't influence the property taxes directly, the long-term negative side effects are clear for all who dare to look.
In case some of you are thinking that our misguided statements here could be steered towards the light if we just educated ourselves and really understood how TIFs work, I really need to be clear on something because it's quite clear to me that this maybe is still being lost in translation. We don't need TIF explained to us at all anymore.
The entire public was really being treated like they were stupid about tax increment financing. I mean, that was part of the reporting at the time, is that, listen, the public just doesn't get it.
Right. Some of us have been researching TIF longer than some of you have been serving on city council.
Local landlords are being pushed out of town, forced to sell their properties to the wealthy who raise everyone's rent until the only people who can afford to live here are the super affluent.
Some of us have been reporting on TIF longer than some of you have been on council.
The housing problem is then worsened further by crooked property management companies that prey on the large influx of fresh, naive college students every autumn.
But the comments you guys were making, for me, demonstrated not only did you get it, but you were having an impact in getting other people in the community to get it.
We've read the theory, we've seen the charts, we understand the philosophy, we understand it.
The housing problem can't be solved by building expensive condos. Most people that I know are struggling financially. They're right on the edge of foreclosure, bankruptcy, and homelessness.
We also already acknowledge the good that these programs are capable of delivering.
A vast majority of my generation will never be able to own their own property because the financial conditions required to deliver the American dream no longer exist.
But honest research embraces both polarities, and there seems to be a pathological aversion to even acknowledge the evidence-based fact that TIFs aren't all they're cracked up to be.
Most in my generation can only afford to live in overpriced filing cabinets, vertical Hoovervilles for students and the working poor.
The truth is that the warnings and criticisms of TIF are not coming from us, but some of the most highly esteemed academics in America today who sternly warn that the experiment you're currently running in Missoula with MRA right now has been run before, and the cumulative results do not paint a picture of prosperity.
Despite solid U.S. economic growth this year, the share of Americans who are struggling financially remains statistically unchanged for the last year. 70% of Americans say they are struggling financially, according to a 2019 study by the Financial Health Network. That's 70% nationwide. I would be willing to venture that it is much higher in Montana.
Samuel Stein, in particular, who some of you may be aware of, refers to tax increment financing as a geo-bribe.
All of these issues compound together and are worsened by improper management and crony capitalism.
I was thinking today about when I was a kid and walking across the footbridge up the Rattlesnake, and I saw nothing but dead trout up and down the creek as far as I could look, because millionaire Dennis Washington had dynamited Rattlesnake Creek so he could make his own little private fish pond. The city of Missoula didn't do a damn thing about it. No one was arrested. No one was cited.
What wealthy developers and out-of-state millionaires and out-of-touch bureaucrats are forgetting is that everyone depends on the working poor to keep the society moving.
But that's the way things have been in Missoula. That's the way things have always been in Missoula. If you got the money and you got the influence, you can do anything you want around here.
And that's 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's 3 minutes, Mr. Hunt.
We can roll turds in glitter all day long, but if we allow Missoula to fall to corporate America, the people who give Missoula its signature flavor increasingly won't want to live here anymore.
Yes, sir.
My name is Staff Sergeant Brandon Bryant, and I will be speaking until I'm done. I was thinking a lot about addressing the members of the council, but I also realize that the members of the council I do not need to address, because the majority of you have betrayed our country and our community, and I want you to know this, and I want you to see it in my eye, what I think about each and every one of you.
So here's the parable. The Old Testament and King David, right? So King David is on his throne, and he sees Bathsheba bathing on her rooftop, right? And he's like, I want this woman. And finds out that she's married and sends her husbands to the front line to die. So the prophet Nathan walks in and he's like, hey, David, I have a story for you about a man that's in your kingdom.
I'm going to tell you a story.
He says, there was once a rich man with 99 sheep and a poor man with one.
There was once a rich man who had 99 sheep and a poor man who had one. And the rich man was going to have a guest come over to his house.
And so he goes out to his field to survey his 99 sheep and sees that all of them are less than the poor man's one sheep.
But the poor man's one sheep was better than his, so he went and took the poor man's sheep and served it to his guest, and left the poor man with nothing.
And leaves the poor man with nothing. And as I said that, they're just kind of do. And I was like, do you know what that means? Do you understand what this story means?
Do you understand that story?
I was just going to tell the story and just leave, you know? And as I was telling the story, they were sitting there looking on their cell phones, typing on the computer. None of them were paying attention to me. None of them.
What did you do, Mr. Bryant, to make sure that they were listening?
I yelled at them. I gave them my staff sergeant voice.
You are that rich man!
You're not going to yell in this chamber, sir, or you're not going to be able to participate in the meeting.
You need to understand, mister.
Sir?
Point of what order. You have done?
You need to
You have sold out this community.
I'll adjourn the meeting and we'll...
That's fine. Okay. Because you have wrecked...
We will adjourn the meeting.
The trust in this community.
We're off until we can calm down.
I remember thinking it was certainly inappropriate in my opinion. I thought that it certainly went against the grain of what those local activists had been doing, which is coming in, being respectful, even praising the council on things that they thought the council did right.
I just wanted to say thank you and congratulations to the council for the conciliatory and cooperative attitude that we've received, especially from Councilman Ramos and Councilwoman Harp, who's been working with our citizen group, who's been coming in here to address our concerns directly every week.
Thank you guys for listening and responding.
So when Mr. Bryant spoke out like that, I was obviously turned off by that, and I think the rest of the council was as well. Granted, they were turned off by everything they said, so for me to be turned off by it, it was saying a lot more than the rest of the council to be turned off by it. I thought it was inappropriate and quite frankly counterproductive to the point those activists were trying to make.
I can only remember one other occasion, sort of vaguely, where I gavelled the meeting to a close and simply recessed it.
Yeah, and so Mayor Engen at that point, I mean, they did take a recess, correct?
Yep, and I walked out.
Those TIF activists and him actually left the meeting politely after that, and from what I understand, a lot of the other folks were not too pleased with Mr. Bryant's actions and conduct because I think it painted them all in a bad light.
I think that they deserve it.
There was one individual who was very strident in his commentary at meetings.
One of the other activists had been more confrontational than the rest of us.
Some of his analogies and metaphors that he used began to frighten people on the council because they began to take them as threats.
And do I think that Mr. Bryant was ever a threat? No, not at all. I wasn't afraid. I don't think it frightened the people on council, but the vast majority of folks saw this as an opportunity to silence the dissent that they had been bothered by for so many months before that.
I am happy to be back in order. I've been pretty liberal over the course of the last 14 years when it comes to the public comment portion of our agenda. And I've tried to provide some latitude around that so that folks can be comfortable in this space that belongs to them. Last week, that didn't happen. Last week, I'm aware that at least one person was so rattled by our public comment period that they didn't get up to say what was on their mind based on the business that this council had to do that evening. So I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I don't like having a police officer here, but people felt unsafe last week. So I've got an officer here. It's not my preference to eject anyone from the meeting, but we've got business to conduct. So with that, 3 minutes general public comment.
We're interested to note the presence of law enforcement here tonight, and I do find overwhelmingly his presence positive, because one of the many municipal services that are negatively affected by tax increment financing are police departments and first responders. So we acknowledge our responsibility for Officer Ferris's presence here today, but I must remain vigilant in our endeavor to move forward in solving our community's rapidly multiplying problems in a productive way. So it's worth mentioning here that while it was not our unanimous intent to break the procedural rules of the council last week, there is one potential positive of last week's disruption. The Missoula City Council is now, perhaps for the very first time, witnessed firsthand the palpable frustration running through this community like a raging river. This emotion is not exclusive to us. The truth is that a great many Missoulians, and more broadly, a great many Americans, feel that their concerns are ignored by those in power. So, in the interest of making the best of a bad situation, we have not assembled here tonight to speak. We have assembled here to listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Other general public comment this evening? All right, seeing none, we will move on to our consent agenda.
Popping up around Missoula in coffee shops and on power poles. It looks like a lost pet poster until you look a little closer, and turns out Tiff Kitty is a political poster.
I was actually doing my lunchtime walk around my office on Brook Street, and I happened across this poster.
And it's focused on special tax increment financing money.
And I remember seeing it on a light pole outside of my office and thinking that it was a very clever way of describing what TIF was.
You've probably seen, as we have, The many countless lost pet posters popping up all over town that seem to signal a mobilization within this community who consider the current state of the city nothing short of an emergency situation.
There was an unbelievable amount. I remember I was out on my run on the Kim Williams Trail, and like 3 miles down the Kim Williams Trail where you can't drive, there was a poster hanging up on one of the signs. I was like, well, that is unbelievable, all over the place. So I thought that was excellent. I know that a local news outlet did a story on it. So I'm sure that the people in charge did not enjoy those.
People asked us who made it, so we tried to get to the bottom of it, but in the process found something else.
If you own property in a designated business improvement district here in Missoula, part of your property taxes go into a special fund. That money is then used for projects in that area. Very simply, that's tax increment financing. But we found some of that money isn't being used how you'd expect.
Imagine this. You paid for your neighbor's new pool, and then anytime you want to use it, they charge you. That's similar to the deal 2 banks cut with the city of Missoula.
Multi-million-dollar subsidy. Multi-million-dollar subsidy.
Experts say they've never seen anything like this.
I haven't seen that before. This is very unusual today.
Here's the situation Merriman is talking about.
Stockman Bank. Now this is insanity.
Stockman Bank built this almost $30 million building.
Now Stockman's Bank is the biggest bank, the wealthiest bank in the state of Montana. They don't need a subsidy to do anything.
And then just months ago, the city issued this $1.5 million bond to pay for that. All of it, taxpayer money raised by tax increment financing.
The last place it needs a subsidy to build something is Stockman Bank, but they're given this subsidy to put up a multi-story building, another Stockman Bank building that will house absolutely no one.
Why does Stockman Bank need a tower in downtown?
I don't think Stockman Bank had any intention to be anywhere but downtown Missoula and in central Missoula, because that's what it takes to be a big player in the banking market in the city of Missoula. And when they came to the market, they got TIF assistance for both buildings.
So Missoula is going to get this multi-million-dollar subsidy, but guess what? City didn't have that much money in its reserves. So they borrowed it. They borrowed it from Stockman Bank.
And it wasn't just a one-time payment. Check this out. The bank holds the bond issued to reimburse them, meaning they're making money off a taxpayer-funded project benefiting them.
Missoula awarded $1.5 million to Stockman Bank in TIF money. But since Missoula didn't have the money in hand, Stockman Bank loaned Missoula the $1.5 million.
And we'll pay back to you with 4% interest.
What happened is the city of Missoula issued revenue bonds, all bought by Stockman Bank, which constitutes a loan. And so right now, the city of Missoula is paying interest on a multi-million-dollar issuance of revenue bonds to Stockman Bank.
Of course, municipal bonds are always considered such a great investment because they're secured by the almost unlimited power of the government to raise taxes. Not these bonds. These bonds were secured by a prediction. Everything will just be dandy and rosy forever. And that expectation. You know what you call bonds like that? Junk bonds.
First Interstate Bank got the same deal almost 10 years ago. The city reimbursed them $1.6 million. And the bond? A more than 6% interest rate going to First Interstate Bank.
But what people may not understand is the reason you do that. The reason you do that is because under state law, if you issue general obligation bonds, you have to get a vote of the people.
And this is money that was borrowed from the recipient of the subsidy in order to be given to the recipient of the subsidy. This is absolute insanity.
Taking a loan out from an investment bank just to give taxpayer money to that investment bank as a corporate handout, while paying interest to the same bank.
Borrowed from Stockman Bank, the money they're lending to Stockman Bank, and they're paying it back to Stockman Bank with interest.
Experts still question the arrangement.
Well, there's a couple of things that are very unusual about that. The bank being a beneficiary of TIF funds and then also buying the bond isn't, at least in my experience, very unusual. I had never heard about it.
And Merriman is a nationally recognized expert who's been studying TIF for decades.
The problem is I don't believe TIF was necessary to make those projects happen. And so what you have is a big subsidy that takes money out of the pockets of the local school district, the county, the city general fund, in order to subsidize development that otherwise would have existed anyway.
Missoula Redevelopment Agency Director Ellen Buchanan didn't want to interview with us, but in an email, Buchanan tells us there's nothing unusual about this for Missoula. She says since the banks paid for the projects before they were reimbursed, it was only logical that they purchased the bonds. Buchanan says the city's financial advisor makes sure the interest rates are competitive, and the whole process, she says, is easier and more cost-effective for the city. But Merriman says that kind of closed-door deal could be a problem.
Private sales are generally less transparent than auction sales, and so all of that raises questions.
Missoula is now paying interest on the money that was given to Stockman through tax increment financing. What's worse, all TIFs now go through Stockman Bank, further incentivizing more gentrification forever and ever, over and over again.
So that's a wonderful thing when the biggest bank in Montana gets to come to the city of Missoula and build this gigantic building that should not be supported in this manner in the first place.
Many of us cannot see Stockman Bank without feeling a surge of anger.
Tell me this isn't socialism for the richest top 1/2 of 1% of the people in this city and this state, and it's benefiting absolutely no one. But, it's said, no, but this benefits everyone because a new construction like this raises the property values around it, and then that in turn raises more revenues. Well, that is not a positive thing. The impact of having projects that surround the core of the downtown, a lot of iconic businesses there, including old family-owned businesses, been there a long time. You know, the kind of office supply store and places like that. People like to go instead of going to the box chains, which are often subsidized with TIF, by the way, and come in and put the locals out of business. The owners of these buildings were hit unexpectedly and suddenly from the state with assessments that tripled their property taxes.
What's always left out of this conversation is what we've been trying to communicate is how inappropriate TIF subsidies are contributing significantly to these socioeconomic trends.
You're not helping us. You're helping people who have already got everything they need.
Our local businesses are closing up, locals are being taxed out of the area, entire communities are displaced to make way for tourists with townhouses, and most disturbing of all is your complicity in this transgression.
Backdoor increasing of prices on the people who can least afford it.
Had they been completely ignorant to all the potential effects of the policies they were enacting, we told them plainly enough what they would be. And then when they started to plainly play out and they doubled down at every turn, I start to realize that these sort of unintended consequences of their policies were in fact fully intended.
It's starting to look like that effect isn't entirely unintentional.
Deeper study reveals that some of you are not interested in preserving what we have. Some of you seem hell-bent on raising the Garden City and transforming it into a corporate nightmare.
It's not exactly on the books, but it's a well-known result of these things, and here we are just happily pushing them every opportunity we get.
And you seem to have just enough power to help wealthy developers destroy what's left of this community.
They don't need any more help. They don't need our tax money.
For some of you, gentrification isn't a bug, but a feature.
The real effects of the economic disparity in our town and our country are visible daily in our streets.
Go fuck the world, but make sure the world fucks you first!
I don't know how often you guys walk around downtown. I would imagine often enough to see what happens there.
The fucking world's gonna fuck you, bitch! It's gonna fuck you hard! It's gonna fuck you big! It's gonna fuck you large! So get fucked, Tri-Valley fucking scum!
Pretty much every day, someone has a complete mental breakdown.
Ah, try me!
Right in our downtown shopping district. Requires ambulance and fire and police and everybody to come out and spend a whole bunch of money. You could probably house that person for an entire year with what's spent on the emergency service for one response.
Oh, that's socialism. Right now, it is socialism for the mega rich. That is what is happening right now.
I'm quite alarmed, as I'm sure everyone else is, at the recent spate of reports of homicides and violence in Missoula.
There was a guy killed at the Poverello Center last week.
I can kill at will.
You can kill at will?
Yeah. I'm like the new CIA. I'm the government.
I see so much conflict and I hear so much going on here, and I don't understand that. It never was like this before.
I hear people are finding used needles in their alleyways, and constant stories of theft seem to be the norm now.
And getting prescriptions for Narcan so that we can save the lives of the folks who are shooting up in the alley behind my house.
Missoula is changing.
Well, that isn't the problem at all. The problem is that the city of Missoula, under its leader, has recited a platitude for the last several years that we're going to, quote unquote, end homelessness in Missoula, end quote.
So we created a 10-year plan to end homelessness.
And nothing's really being done about that.
Because it's obvious for any who care to look that you've become disconnected from the people you're hurting.
There's a dozen people I could find you in the street in 10 minutes need our tax money.
Some of my public comments were, if the city's got millions of dollars to be thrown around on this and that and the other thing, we've got some pretty clear needs to address and plenty of concert venues and hotels,
We in Missoula, Montana are going to end homelessness because we believe that everyone has a right to a safe, decent place to live.
There's 3,200 people in Missoula below the poverty level. So what contributes to that? Housing. Why does housing rise? Because property taxes rise.
Local governments, including here in Montana, rely on property tax revenue to fund government. And individual property owners are the primary contributors to the cost of those local governments.
We wouldn't have to increase the burden on already desperate taxpayers if we weren't blowing all of our collective tax dollars on money-losing endeavors that disproportionately benefit the wealthy through overuse and abuse of TIF.
And it's going to put more and more of our local businesses out of business because their rents are going to go up when their property taxes go up because of the increased valuation that TIF will make in those districts.
Homelessness isn't ended yet. It's only about year 3.
It's absurd. I mean, we just saw it in the paper. $315,000 is now the median housing price. Every time we do stuff like this, it contributes to that.
And then the buildings will be abandoned, and then they'll be bought up by the same people who are benefiting from TIF now. And guess what? They'll be declared blighted because they're empty, and you will approve demolition.
To justify highly irrational use of everybody else's tax monies.
You don't want the people to have power and control because you know they would never approve that. Never in a million years would they have approved that, and you know it.
The guy who got killed at the POV a couple weeks ago needed our tax money.
What you don't want to face is the despair, poverty, and suicides that you have caused.
And people ought to feel guilty about that, I would think. I think you should be ashamed of that kind of thing.
We need every dime we have for the people who are already here. Thank you.
Matthew Wardell never imagined he'd be here, talking at a city council meeting.
I'm not a particularly political person. And I've never done anything like this at all with local politics.
Now, he doesn't miss a meeting. Why?
TIF.
He's talking about tax increment financing, special property tax money used for projects we've told you about, like Stockman Bank's new building, First Interstate Bank's downtown location, public art, the Missoula Mercantile.
And even these wonderful projects like the new satellite station for partnership that they're being propped up on this house of cards.
But the way you get this stuff built is to incentivize it. And the way to incentivize it is to pay them to do it. And the way they pay them to do it is with tax increment financing, and it works like this.
Explain to us, what is tax increment financing?
Tax increment financing, or TIF it's referred to.
First of all, any city official who sees this interview will respond that Mr. Hunt just doesn't understand tax increment financing, because this is the response to any critic, no matter how much they present facts and figures.
I think one of the things that has often eluded a lot of folks, frankly, I don't blame you, is because you don't necessarily have all the facts.
Trying to do some education around TIF, because there is considerable misinformation and misunderstanding.
If you disagree with the MRA wanting to spend tens of millions of dollars, or the mayor, the explanation is you just don't understand.
She said, well, I think the only criticisms come from people that just don't understand it. I think that everybody here in this audience has demonstrated a tremendous amount of research and a tremendous amount of understanding over TIF, not just TIF overall, but even the specifics of how it's implemented in the state of Montana.
It's the subject of much debate in our community, not well understood by a lot.
How can we reshape that so that folks understand?
Well, you just don't understand. You don't get it. It's these big, crazy, complicated economical issues. Yeah, no, whew, way over my head.
Good evening, good to see you all here. I'm sure you noticed, as I did, that the Missoulian is launching a new quarterly publication focusing on doing PR for business, and they're calling it Missoula Business. This is the very first one. I find it amusing that this vapidly titled quarterly will feature a notable business person, among other things, and the very first one that they have is a lawyer from the MRA, and the topic is PR spin for, you guessed it, tax increment financing. I was glad to read this.
Well, the reason we don't agree with TIF is that we don't understand it.
And once again, with predictability that pains me to ponder, there is no specific response to criticisms or concerns about TIF, even though you had a whole cover story, a centerfold's worth of material here to do so.
It's often misunderstood.
It is not a misunderstanding. A lot of us understand what's going on.
Instead, Natasha Prinzing-Jones, an unelected MRA representative married to a banker from an institution that benefits from TIF, instead of responding to specific concerns, Prinzing-Jones once again defaults to the same politically expedient tactic as all the other TIF addicts, claiming that Missoula's citizens are just too brainless, too ignorant, and too stupid to understand how TIF works.
It's like they thought that I was stupid.
There's a lot of things I've been reading, published in Missoulian, that just offend me.
The entire public was really being treated like they were stupid about tax increment financing.
Stop this nonsense of calling everybody in the city stupid that they don't understand.
The whole purpose of the government at this point now is to deceive the citizens. So whether that's the federal, the state, or the local level, the government activities are only made possible because they have the guise of complexity. They can tell people that, okay, we've got this. You don't need to take a look at any of this anymore. Just trust us. Trust the politicians, trust the bureaucrats, and we'll take care of you. And the bigger the government gets, the more complex it gets, and the more that mindset shifts from the people are supposed to be in charge. The political figures, the bureaucrats, they're supposed to work for the citizens. But the bigger the government gets, that gets flipped.
So I've had two hometowns for the last 30 years, Missoula and Oregon City.
I graduated from Rattlesnake Grade School, Hellgate High School, and the University of Montana, but I did take a wild foray into Oregon for a few years.
And the reason I loved Oregon City so much, it reminded me of what Missoula was like back in the 60s. We had an initiative that we qualified for the ballot there to amend the city charter so they could not issue bonded indebtedness for tax increment financing without approval of the people. And it passed by a big margin. And we all worked together and we uncovered corruption and all kinds of things. And it was the same kind of situation that happened here in Missoula. Myself and about 4 people started attending every single city council meeting, and I commented every single time. And I was one of the 3 chief petitioners for an initiative petition to amend the city charter so that no kind of bonds could be issued, sold, in order to raise money to subsidize TIF projects unless the people approved this. It was a torpedo that hit. And so Since that time, there's not been this kind of runaway abuse with tax increment financing.
Natasha says that critics don't even show up at MRA meetings. I wonder if we're to consider this an invitation. If so, please be careful what you wish for.
If you criticize a project supported by tax increment financing, also known as TIF, the response from city officials is, well, you need to understand, you don't understand how TIF works.
Well, let me tell you, I do understand. It's nothing but taking taxpayer money and giving it to developers and builders and calling it investment.
Or they'll say, yep, but it's the only tool we've got.
We also face the fact that we only have one tool in our toolbox in terms of being able to actually remedy our economic decline in certain neighborhoods.
MRA funding is an integral tool, and as of now, the only local funding tool we have to subsidize affordable housing.
You can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This is the only thing we have.
And TIF really ends up being one of the most powerful and frankly only tools to provide incentives for business development and real estate investment.
It's one of the only tools we have to build things like affordable housing.
The thing of it is, it's the only economic development tool that we have allowed by state law.
Those are all great things. Creating jobs, creating economic development, helping nonprofits, growing the tax base. None of them are mentioned in state law when it comes to urban renewal districts.
These guys feel the same way.
The pedestrian bridge on California Street got TIF funding for repairs. That's an appropriate use of the TIF statute.
It sounds pretty benign, like post-traumatic stress. You know what I mean? It's like, it's doesn't really explain what it is. And so when I first heard it, it actually didn't sound like all that bad of an idea on the surface.
States and local governments use tax increment financing as a tax policy tool to help subsidize costs in redevelopment projects.
If the city can come up with some money up front to improve a blighted area, you know, and then reap the benefits from that by the added value, then it's sure great, why not? But that's, in practice, obviously not how things work.
Okay, so this is the essence of tax increment financing.
Imagine the city of Missoula has a property tax base of $100 million. It's a big pie. Divide that pie into three roughly equal slices: the city, the county, the schools, the three taxing jurisdictions. And now let's take a specific geographic area. We actually have one that's Urban Renewal District 3. We take the walking bridge on Reserve, wrap around through Cabela's, wrap around by the fairgrounds, all the way back to Mount and back again. Let's just say that that particular slice of pie has a property tax base of $10 million at the time the district is created. And for the remainder of that TIF district, the only money that goes to the police, the county, the schools is the $10 million. That's it. There's still growth because property taxes go up, the new construction, everything else, inflation, everything goes up. So let's just say that district grows from $10 million to $15 million. The $5 million of growth is skimmed off the top and given to the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, which is an unelected board of mayoral appointed bureaucrats. Every single one of them has donated to the mayor's re-election campaign, and their budget, the MRA's budget last year, was $35 million. The city of Missoula last year took in, separate from that, $36 million of property taxes. That's it. We took in $36 million of property tax revenue. The MRA, an unelected board of bureaucrats, took in $35 million, and that basically explains TIF. It's created to more or less eliminate blight. That's the only reason it's created. But the thing is, in Montana, there's 15 criteria that define something as blight. The city has to match 4 of those. We could declare the University of Montana campus blighted if we had to. Easily we could declare blighted. It's ridiculous. And one thing I want to add about this, because Mr. Hunt brought it up, and it's so important because he stated that they changed the city charter so that you could not bond within a TIF district unless there was a vote. And the reason that's so pivotal is because a TIF district expires after 15 years default. But there's a small provision within Montana Code Annotated, the state law, that states if you sell debt within a district, it extends the district out the length of the bonds for a maximum of 40 years. Urban Renewal District 3 is 1 square mile. That's the walking bridge to Cabela's. I just explained that one. It was set to expire in the year 2015. Literally,
in September of 2015, all of a sudden, whoops, we sold $5 million worth of bonds for the walking bridge and extended that district out to the year 2040. So it's going to be 2040 until that district is paying a cent more in property taxes than year 2000. The reason it raises property taxes is because that district has more people going to school, more people using the police, more people using the fire, more people using the infrastructure. So the rest of the population has to make up for that because their tax dollars, which everybody in that district that's a property owner thinks their taxes are going to the police, the fire, the infrastructure, but a huge chunk of it's being given to these developers, to the Lambros family, to the Walking Bridge, to Cabela's. Are you kidding me? I mean, there's 6 urban renewal districts in this city.
The primary role on council is to understand the budget. And that is the biggest power and the most amount of power that the city council has, is to oversee a budget of $235 million. And there are many different components of that. There's enterprise funds, there's mountain water that's in that, there's wastewater, stormwater, there's property taxes, there's fines, fees, surcharges, there's different permits and costs to do various different things that all contribute to the overall $235 million. So to me, as a wealth manager who does this full time, even me when I first got on council, it took me a long time to wrap my head around the inner workings of the finances and the different financial processes, local government finance. There's different types of bonds that you have to understand. So I don't quite frankly understand how most people can get on council and think that they're qualified for that role.
This is a hidden tax. Again, this is paid for by the homeowner. It's not paid for by the developer.
Anytime we increase our capacity here in Missoula, it's going to cost. So it's a question of to what extent do we put it on all taxpayers.
There's a hidden tax that comes with interest.
They're also very worried about property taxes.
We've taken about $21 million out of that road district since we created it. I tallied it up, and I think it's hard pressed to find any citizens that would agree that our roads have gotten that much substantially better over it.
There's so many streets in the Franklin to the Fort neighborhood that are simply crumbling apart, and we need tools to be able to address those things. We have very few tools other than property taxes as a city to take care of this crumbling infrastructure.
I'm just trying to show that it's not just this that adds up and makes housing more affordable. It's all these different things that are layered on.
So tax increment financing is what a good reporter that I know here in town calls the skim and give method. So
you declare an urban renewal district, or sometimes called a TIF district, and within that district, property taxes are quote-unquote frozen, which really is not freezing them, but it creates what's called a base value. And that is, what is the current assessed value in terms of property taxes? And it's not really frozen, and I'll tell you why. That's called the increment.
So essentially you have a set property tax base in a local district for a certain number of years. And every year the property taxes grow from valuation increases, from taxable mills going up every year to bond measures. All that growth within the district is skimmed off the top and given to private corporations, pet projects, various other things. And what that does is these districts are usually 40 years long. So for 40 years, these districts aren't paying a nickel more in property taxes than they were to the general fund.
That's the tax increment. Now what happens is then, as the value of that property and property around it increases as a result of the new construction, all of the assessed property value and taxes that are collected that is above that base level doesn't go into the general fund. It doesn't go for any services. It doesn't support the new schools, the additional police, the additional fire protection, emergency medical services, community outreach, and everything else that a newly developing and renewed part of town needs. It goes into the fund, the slush fund of the Urban Renewal Agency. And then that in turn is used to subsidize more of these projects.
Local government can't provide the services they need to provide without increasing taxes, because inflation exists, yet the base is capped, and that's all they have to pull from. So
I want to make it very clear, these districts are still carrying their fair share. They're still paying the same property tax that you and I are. The difference is that the growth in their property taxes is being skimmed off the top and given to private developers, private corporations, various pet projects around the city. So you might think your property property taxes are paying for police, fire, infrastructure, schools, and that's not always the case. A portion of them always will be, but for a lot of people, over half of their property taxes are being paid in these TIF districts, into this Missoula Redevelopment Agency, and you can see it right on your property taxes if you look. Just look up your property tax bill and you'll see special assessments, and it'll say what urban renewal district you're in and what percentage of your taxes are actually going to pay for these private developers to make even more money, or pay for these pet projects. Or a lot of times business owners in these districts, you'll take a look at their property tax bill and you'll see big chunk of it's going to a TIF district, and then you'll say, okay, what projects recently got TIF money? And a lot of times it's these small business owners' competitors that are getting their tax dollars to compete against them.
A public subsidy, a certain amount, is put in up front. Once this subsidy goes in, now the investor and the builder can say, I don't have to worry that I might not make a big profit on this project, because my profit's coming from the public investment.
We truly believe right now that the government does not have a revenue problem. We think that the government has a spending problem. And
what really happens is the municipality gives subsidy money to the developer or the builder. Right. And the way they make this money back is by putting that cap, and that cap isn't really on the property tax, it's on what the property tax is used for. Bernie Madoff did something kind of similar to this, and we went to prison, right? Yeah. So it's kind of a Ponzi kind of situation.
I talked to somebody about the buildings downtown, so many big tall buildings going up and crowding. A long time ago, I think Jeff Badnock, started all this, and I don't think he expected it to get to this point.
I am curious how many of you are familiar with one Jeff Badnock.
Jeff Tiger Prawn Badnock.
Jeff Tiger Prawn Badnock is the former director of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency, and in turn the guy who used to be responsible for overseeing TIF, an office he oversaw for 18 years. This is what he said, quote,
"On most issues, I would not agree with Jesse Ramos, but on the issue of TIF funds, it seems that there's less daylight between our views."
I'm Jeff Badnock. I worked for the Missoula Redevelopment Agency for 20 years, retired in January of 2004. I was the director there for about 18 years.
I was aware of the issues that Jeff Badnock raised back in October.
Inappropriate TIF subsidies that set dangerous precedents for further use of the TIF law. Our latest case in point being, unfortunately, the Missoula Food Bank, which is an organization that has helped me and a lot of people I know, and I volunteered there, but this TIF is blatantly inappropriate.
And this was the creation of, I believe, a clinic on the upper floor of the food bank. The food bank building was brand new.
To say that a brand new building is blighted.
And while I agree that there is a need for low-income medical, I couldn't see in my experience what funding a clinic on the upper floors of the food bank did by way of eliminating blight.
The problem we have with healthcare in this country, you can't TIF it out of existence. Nor can you TIF homelessness out of existence.
This particular use might even be worth referring to the state attorney general for an opinion as to its legality.
Ms. Buchanan, there were questions regarding state code and the use of TIF funding.
Ellen Buchanan, Director of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency.
So Ellen Buchanan, in my mind, is the most powerful leader in Missoula. A vote has never been cast for her. She runs the MRA slush fund. So she has an incredible amount of power. And I also will say Ellen Buchanan is a very, very intelligent person. She is the most intelligent person in local government.
I think one thing that comes into play here is the fact that in order to create an urban renewal district, you have to make findings of blight.
TIF is a tool that cannot be used until there is an urban renewal plan in place. An urban renewal plan cannot be put in place until and unless the local government makes a finding of blight or that blight exists.
They're only for the elimination of blight.
First of all, It's not to be used for things like building more government buildings.
That doesn't include buildings and affordable housing and all these other things that we're doing.
The definition of blight is laid out in state law, and it includes, a dozen or better different conditions, and you have to meet so many of those in order to declare an area blighted.
The goal is simply the elimination of blight.
And I think what that's translated into for a lot of people is that tax increment financing dollars can only be used to address those specific things that are laid out in that definition of blight.
Back to basics. What constitutes blight? Folks, this is a new building. This is a brand new building.
But that blight can be anything the Urban Renewal Agency decides is blight.
It's a complete perversion of language to refer to some of these areas as blight.
I think it's pretty hard to make an argument that there's very much blight that exists in the city of Missoula. Areas that have essentially worthless or nearly worthless property values, and the need for demolition or environmental remediation that just simply could not exist but for TIF.
But if you read the statute in its entirety, there are references all through the statute to things that really speak to this type of project.
Ellen Buchanan is the current director of the Missoula Redevelopment Agency.
She's very calculating. She sees things before they happen. She knows exactly what to say at the exact right time, and she understands TIF inside and out, and understands, furthermore, how you can leverage TIF or abuse TIF in ways that the chief executive, who she serves at the pleasure of, Mayor Engen, wants.
We've had one mayor, Mayor Engen, that she's worked with, and that's a certain amount of stability. I worked under 4 mayors, maybe 4 mayors at least. And, they all brought their own stamp to the city, what they wanted to accomplish. And Bill Craig was mayor when our urban renewal district began. John Toole was our mayor after Bill Craig, and John Toole was instrumental in getting the state legislature to pass our urban renewal law at the state level. And then after John Toole came Bob Lovegrove, then Dan Kemmis, then Mike Cadis, and John Engen became mayor after I left.
So I think a lot of this is more Mayor Engen's doing, and he has somebody who, if that's what your goal is to leverage TIF and then use it to your will, she's the perfect person for the job.
The city attorney responded, and he responded in almost exactly the same way I have addressed this tonight.
She controls the purse strings of that body. She understands the politics of it. She understands the parliamentary negotiations. She understands state law around it very, very well, and as a consequence, she knows how to bend that to her will, and more importantly, to the mayor's will, the chief executive's will.
I want to thank Ellen Buchanan for illustrating how the evolution of the TIF law since the 1970s consistently results in wider and wider interpretations, lending itself to misuse and indeed abuse.
The danger with TIF is that there is a temptation to use it every which way. If you can square it in the law anyway, to use it.
We're going to buy that property. We're going to buy a portion of that building, and it will be for a public use. That's no different than using TIF funds to buy a piece of land and building a public park for public use.
The Partnership Health Center, it's not really eliminating blight.
It has to do with state law and the elimination of blight, and I appreciate that we're having a discussion about this, because this is honestly the first discussion that we've had since I've been on council about if a project constituted blight or not.
Right now, the definition of blight in state code is frankly bizarre. I mean, one of the indicators of blight is that there's excess land coverage, density. But we're using TIF to create higher density.
Now, the state law says that once you make a finding that blight exists, then the city is required by law to create an urban renewal plan to address the blight, to prevent its spread and eliminate its existence.
Blighted area means an area that is conducive to ill health, transmission of disease, infant mortality, juvenile delinquency, and crime.
For example, one of the things that the state law finds in blighted areas are increased demands for fire and police services.
It is essentially a tool meant to correct physical deficiencies that create social problems.
Again, Physical blight is what Montana Code Annotated is meant to eliminate.
I also think the definition of blight that was, began during the 70s, and clearly things have changed.
This whole TIF conversation has been so perverted, and all the different definitions, and they've all been so twisted and turned to where you can literally use blight for anything.
Do you remember the example I gave you with the bridge, the Reserve Street Bridge? I said, Ellen, how did this bridge eliminate blight? It's right by the country club. It's right by Larchmont Golf Course. It's right by a huge industrial complex with the AutoZone, and Aaron's is right there. I mean, it's not blighted. I mean, there's nobody in the world that could say that was blighted with a straight face. But Alan says, well, Jesse, it completed the trail, and people love to build on trailfront property. So even though it didn't eliminate blight in that specific area, it eliminated blight down the road. And I'm assuming she's talking like in East Missoula or something, like 5 miles down the road in East Missoula. It eliminated blight because people love to build on trailfront properties, and because this trail is completed, now it's going to eliminate blight all along the trail. So it's like, what are you even talking about? Like, how can you say that with a straight face? So they twist it. They can twist everything. I mean, look at the mall. I said, Mr. Mayor, how was the mall blighted? Please tell me, how was the mall blighted? Tell me how the mall was blighted. And he said, well, Jesse, that's future blight. It's like, what? I said, well, shopping malls are going out of business nationwide. Look at the place in Helena. Even if it was going out of business, you cannot take on Jeff Bezos and Amazon with an $8 million taxpayer handout. You can't reverse a nationwide economic trend with a little handout. So what are you even talking about?
I think the definition encompasses so much more than what is in written statute nowadays.
It's gotten so bad that I don't even know where to start.
Ellen says that blight constitutes a serious and growing menace.
It's declared that blighted areas, which constitute a serious and growing menace, injurious to the public health and safety and morals.
To a lot of the people that I've familiarized myself with in the last several months, what constitutes a serious and growing menace is the prospect that they're going to spend their retirement years waking up in the Poverello Center on a mat because so many people are getting displaced and pushed out of the city because they can't afford it anymore. You've heard me say it before, maybe you haven't actually.
The problem is, in a market like Missoula where there's limited inventory and there's a lot of demand, it just drives up property values because developers know that they're going to get assistance.
Does best practices account for the vicarious displacement of your neighbors vis-a-vis rising property taxes? Because that is one of the after effects.
Because it's hurting a lot of people, and a lot of people are facing this, my taxes went up again, what? How much?
Tripled their property taxes.
Could no longer afford their property tax bills continuing to go up.
Part of that carries over to the rent too, because if you raise the property taxes, then the property owners pass that on to the renters. And so some of the people most affected by raising property taxes aren't the actual owners, they're the people doing the renting. So it really prices out low-income folks.
We pay $40,000 a year in property taxes.
Every time property taxes go up, our rents go up. So we're paying the taxes.
This is why we have libertarians and we have socialists coming up here and criticizing the use of TIF.
And it's not to say it can't be used to do good things. It can, and it has. It has been used well here.
You know, downtown Missoula is probably one of the best examples of the use of TIF, and the city regularly, when speaking from the pro-TIF standpoint, regularly goes back to downtown Missoula as it was dilapidating due to the creation of Southgate Mall, which ironically years later then got its own TIF assistance.
In 1976, Southgate Mall opened on the other side of town, and there was a big sucking sound of businesses that went out of downtown to the mall. The sidewalks were 80 years old and were crumbling. Facades were falling apart, bricks were falling out of buildings. That was what motivated the city into creating the Urban Renewal District, that first one in the late 70s. And the area that was designated as blighted, according to state law, was our downtown. Our riverfront was a disaster. There was an oil depot where Toole Park is. There were giant oil tanks there. There was a giant Quonset hut that later got moved up to Evero. There was a railroad siding that went right up to where the Missoulian is now. It was a different time.
What had happened in a city like Whitefish was that they had almost 30% of their tax base tied up in TIF increment.
What percentage of Missoula's tax base is tied up in TIF?
As of our last fiscal year, it was roughly 14%.
You know, the percentage of tax base that's tied up in TIF in Missoula. When I was in the legislature in 2017, and this was a hot button topic, Missoula was at about 4%. As the mayor noted, I think we're near 14% now. And people were criticizing me saying, well, it's only 4%, it's not a big deal. Well, look how far we've come in 3 years. We've gone from 4% to 14%. So we've got exponential growth. And while certainly some of that may have been created because of TIF districts, I think much of it was simply captured. I think we're at a tipping point here where we really need to pay attention. If this isn't watched efficiently, it can create tax increases.
The depriving of funds to schools, police, fire, infrastructure for decades that caused property taxes to rise to pay for that increased use of services of the TIF districts.
Missoula city officials need to take their lead foot off of the development gas pedal.
I'm seeking the elimination of what I see as TIF abuse, skirting state law or finding loopholes in state law, and not efficiently using TIF.
I'm convinced that it can be abused. I mean, I've pointed out time and time again, if you find there's a temptation to use a tool too often, you're not a good craftsman. The thing about tax increment is that it is so tempting to use it because you don't have to go to the voters for it. There's millions lying around.
TIF is subsidizing these businesses where we give $3.6 million to the Mercantile, $1.8 million to the Marriott, $6.9 million to Southgate Mall. All of that money is being stripped away from the tax base so that everybody's taxes are going up because of that. So that brings people in here that are happy to pay those higher taxes, who buy a little old lady's house who can no longer afford a property tax bill. We need to start giving it to the county, the schools, the police, the fire, the infrastructure, and go to fix our roads. The money's already there, but MRA is taking it all. Obviously, we need to leave enough in those districts to service the debt, but above and beyond that, no more new projects, for the love of God.
This is why, as was said, all over the country, these kinds of schemes are being repealed from the books.
So I don't know how you make the argument that this is an inappropriate use of TIF funding.
Anyone can go to mt.gov and look up the urban renewal statutes in the Montana codes annotated. You should write this down. Simply look in Title 7-15, Parts 42 and 43. He says, read it yourself and see if this issue is not as clear-cut as it appears. I think we need to be terribly circumspective about these expansive uses of TIF.
Other communities across the state use blight, and we abuse it more than anybody. We stretch this code more than any other city in the entire state.
We should absolutely be pushing the boundaries on how we use MRA funds.
We're doing all of these great things because we primed the pump by investing in this area and collaborating with private sector and priming the pump to create the money to get stuff moving.
There's reference to health and safety throughout the statutes.
Thanks, Ms. Buchanan, for coming down tonight and talking about the basis for all of this.
We have an expansive viewpoint from the mayor on trying to get things done.
And there also is authorization in the statute to use TIF funds for the acquisition of real property, provide land for public facilities.
Missoula has used it to build other government or public facilities.
I would argue this is a public facility.
Government buildings were being constructed using this.
I think the state law enables us to do this.
And I would invite anyone not just to look at the Montana statutes, look what they did in California.
It was born in California and it did die in California.
The history of tax increment around the country has been that it is a temptation that many cities have not been able to resist. And tax increment gets used in ways that go way out on the fringe of what I think legislatures intended. And as a result, in Minnesota, California, Illinois, other states, legislatures have felt the need to come in and restrict the use of tax increment or eliminate it altogether.
The quote-unquote liberal legislature in California repealed TIF. They abolished it. They shut down urban renewal. They shut down over 400 urban renewal districts.
And yes, but that's a political response to abuse.
Mr. Badnock, again, he ran the Missoula Redevelopment Agency for 18 years, and he agrees that there are some issues with this.
I'm really proud to be able to be on city council and vote yes on something like this.
The use of TIF funds is inappropriate.
I'm happy to try to answer questions, but I would encourage you to read through the statute and find those references that are to something besides water and sewer and streets and sidewalks.
And this item is on the agenda later in the morning.
If TIF is important, quit misusing it, please.
This, again, is the closest thing that we're going to have to a public hearing on spending $500,000 of non-budgeted expenditures from the general fund budget. So this is the most exposure that the public is going to get on the spending on $500,000 of their funds at a city council meeting.
The big issue with bureaucracies is that they don't change when the administration and the will of the voters change. So if the will of the voters put somebody else in there, well, these bureaucrats have even more power than the elected officials that they represent, and they are permanently embedded in the system and in no way subjected to the will of the voter.
If this was coming out of the general fund, this would be a completely different conversation, but this has to do with TIF funds. It has to do with the Missoula Redevelopment Agency having an unelected board that's approving $500,000 of expenditures when not a single vote has been cast for anybody that sits on that board.
I mean, goodness, the amount of power these non-elected bureaucrats have is unbelievable.
There's an unelected, appointed board that oversees these spending decisions in Missoula, and I think that's an issue that also needs to be addressed.
I did have someone ask if you could expand a bit more on who appoints MRA board members. So maybe people
It's all me, as it turns out. So there are 5 members appointed to that board, and those appointments are at my discretion, subject to confirmation by the city council.
They can't issue laws because they're not lawmakers, but they can issue rules, and you can't violate those rules or you go to jail. So it's these workarounds that have given the permanent bureaucracies all the way from the local to the federal level inordinate amounts of power.
If you want to argue that tax increment is a ripoff, you want to argue that it's going the wrong direction, you want to argue that it's resulted in a unnecessary or unreasonable burden on the local taxing jurisdictions, the numbers are there. They just need to be pulled together. You can get information from the state on campaign contributions. Who gave money to which city council person? Who gave and how much to the mayor? All that stuff is available. Its problem is it's not publicized. It's not part of the discussion.
The Missoulian suspiciously withholds Peter Lambros's financial contributions to Mayor Engen's campaign, Andy Holloran's financial contributions to Mayor Engen's campaign, Nick Chakota's financial contributions to Mayor Engen's campaign.
That's not liberal, that's not conservative, it's stupid. Thank you.
I'm not going to have any more comments from sort of the back of the audience. I'm not sure who those are coming from. The council rules are very clear on the wall outside. We sit up here and we listen respectfully to everybody who comes up in front. And it's just not acceptable to play that kind of game from the back of the audience. So if you can't abide by those rules, I'll respectfully ask you to leave.
Just because they are bureaucrats does not give them license to be patronizing to citizens. I think that's rude, and I think it's undemocratic.
This is one of the difficult things that happens when we paint tools with broad brushes.
I think that there's a tendency for folks to try and look for confirmation biases to justify why they're voting the way they're doing, as opposed to listening to the arguments.
There's a whole listing of costs that may be paid by tax increment financing. I have no concerns about the appropriateness of this. I think this is easy.
The narcissism that's involved with thinking that 100% what they're doing is always right.
So would you agree that we don't actually know exactly what services are being rendered and how much time was spent on each service because we haven't seen the detailed billing items?
No, I wouldn't agree.
Wait, so have you seen those? So how do we know?
Because they're reviewed administratively.
So we, the people voting on it, have not actually seen them. The administrators that are not voting on it have seen them.
Point of order, we should be addressing the questions to the chair as a proper means of handling this meeting, please.
And I'll admit that there's certain issues that I will not budge on, but I'll also admit that there's been issues on the council that I've had my mind swayed by the public on, and I haven't seen that from most of my other colleagues. There are some. Heather Harp is a prime example, wonderful person. Her and I don't agree on a lot of issues, but she was willing to listen to me, and we formed a very close friendship.
Jesse, from time to time, we get into conversations about the merits and the demerits of our one and only tool.
And she's been able to work with other people that have dissent from the public, and the rest of the council hates her for that. She has been ostracized from that council.
And this would typically happen in the Administration and Finance Committee. So, Ms. Harp?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
She was thrown off Tax Increment Financing, the committee that oversees it, Administration and Finance, because she had the gall to speak to some of these folks, and myself included probably as well.
And I think we have a long ways to go in this community in terms of being able to tell a compelling story about why TIF is good.
I often bring up the infrastructure necessary to put in affordable housing in the Scott Street area. This is a terribly easy vote, and I'm really excited. It's one of the most exciting votes I'll make during my tenure on council.
And I think that they have this narcissistic feeling where they think that me and the citizens that have came and spoke at the meetings, that they don't know what they're talking about. They're just doing it to be obstructionists.
The comments you guys were making demonstrated not only did you get it, you were having an impact in getting other people in the community to get it, because the 4th Street condo project. I mean, what started off as just like the Nick Chakota 16 million or 100 million, it snowballed.
I just come to just ask all the city council and the mayor included, whose city is this?
These meetings were being just packed at the city council because people were getting hip to the fact that this TIF money was going in, and they were saying, we're building affordable housing and doing this. And what they were doing was building condos for the idle, wealthy, out-of-state people.
These condos are not for the people of Missoula. In fact, they will displace the current residents.
I ask you to think about what it is that makes Missoula special. Is it large, overpriced condos?
I've lived in Missoula for over 50 years. I really don't want to see this happening to Missoula.
I love Missoula. And I think all of you do too. And just think, what if it was your home that they were asking you to leave?
This is a major catastrophic change that's going to happen to some people.
What if it was your home? Your children that had to move, your stuff. But it's not. It's these people's.
We're talking about a neighborhood and a community that is under siege at every front.
And what we are facing with right now is an assault on our lifestyle, an assault on a lifestyle of the people of my community. We're fully vested in this community.
There was a lot more people coming into this awareness.
They're not alone. Just take a look at city council chambers from January last year. And 1 year later,
90 plus people at a really packed meeting, to the point where they had to start lining up in the hallway.
What's up, Missoula? Nice turnout today. Good job. Proud of that.
council members are taking notice.
I think it's amazing, and it makes me proud to be an American that we have so many citizens that are getting involved in their government.
They gotta listen. They just gotta, because we're there telling them.
Ramos says that's what city council meetings are for.
We have a lot of folks that do complain and they don't show up to city council. So we need more people like these TIF activists to start showing up if they want to see true change. I think it's absolutely incredible.
And Wardell agrees. He says the more people that show up, the better.
We're already at a point where they can hardly ignore us. The room is nearly filled every night.
Since there are so many of us here, I think it's probably good that we have limited time each for comment. I think we all know that the city council has fairly limited attention span for some issues. For instance, it doesn't seem like they can concentrate on proposals that are not created exclusively to concentrate wealth.
And that's because you guys are working with nothing but big money. I've been watching it.
This is Faust making the pact with Mephistopheles.
I'm telling you right now, stop it.
I would ask that you do no harm.
I'm going to ask you to work for the people.
You're here to represent the people.
Do not harm people.
I'm from here.
I'm a fourth-generation Missoulian.
Born and raised.
I don't want to see our history bulldozed.
I was born and raised in Missoula, lived here all of my life.
I don't want to see skyscrapers instead of mountains.
I have lived here a very long time.
And I definitely don't want to see my people in tent villages, because that's what's happening in Portland right now.
I learned that there's 500 school children homeless in this town. 500 school children are homeless in Missoula.
Because they're gentrification, because they're pushing people out.
The difference between community development and gentrification is one acknowledges the existing population while the other aims to replace that population.
Don't take what we have in Missoula and destroy it. I think that is really so against the values of our community.
We're talking about the fate of Missoula.
Yes, so I move that we adopt a resolution to vacate the Ronald Avenue right-of-way north of the alley between Block 12 and Block 13 of the Montana Addition.
The property you're talking about with this land vacation is the home I grew up in, built by my great-grandparents, okay?
I'm tired of watching my antiques get tore down. I'm real tired of it.
When you talk about this land vacation, you're talking about destroying 100-year-old trees. My trees.
My heart mourns.
I'm here today to implore Missoula City Council to vote against demolishing these beautiful historic homes and destroying some of the last remaining affordable housing in the University District.
I have lived in one of the homes on South 4th Street, slated to be destroyed for almost 21 years.
Condos kill communities. Condos kill culture, and condos are killing Missoula.
They are a direct representation of gentrification, which has become the generator of blight and poverty throughout the cities in the coast.
I'm sure for Californians fleeing huge tax burdens, Montana's homes, land, and colleges are a great deal.
People who want to move here and buy vacation homes and build luxury condos, but we can't forget the people who are already here.
But for the struggling poor and working classes, it appears we've been abandoned by our leaders for the deep pockets of the rich.
That is not acceptable.
Missoula renters and potential buyers are not competing with other local wage earners for housing. Our home prices are now based on what wealthy people from out of state can afford. Cole Bergquist wants Missoula City Council to rezone 6 historic brick buildings so he can build a giant condo project that no locals will ever be able to afford and neighbors will not be able to ignore, as high density is crammed down the throat of another once quiet Missoula neighborhood.
Where is this mythological Cole Bergquist? Who is he? Why is he not here? No, instead he sends his minions to do his work.
That piece of property is, in his opinion, the best property in Missoula. That's why it'll be a great place for $500,000 condos. Or at least in his opinion, that's why.
Cole Bergquist has lived in the city for a short time compared to many of the people here today.
I have been a resident of Missoula for 43 consecutive years.
I do not support putting in luxury condos in a place of 100-year-old houses and displacing our neighbors.
So when you force them out, you're also removing the magic of that area and the reasons that Missoula had become such a desirable place to live.
So if we do not hold space for our local people and historic places, we will lose what makes this city worth living in.
Think about what it really means to be community, because I don't think that's what their purpose is to support this community. They may say that, but in the end, it's money. And that's what's happening in Missoula.
You're displacing people, but it did displace me.
It does in fact happen in this city that tenants are displaced.
According to the U.S. Census Bureau, while 9,000 people moved to Gallatin County over a 5-year period, over 6,600 people moved away.
I implore you to protect our garden city.
This is why Missoula's income disparity is the 33rd highest in the nation.
According to a study published by the Economic Policy Institute, income disparity in Missoula is ranked 33rd highest in the nation. Did you guys know that? That's crazy.
For someone to buy a home in this town, a medium-priced home, they have to make $95,000 a year.
Where the average income of Missoula households is around $43,000, with 19.8% of the people living below the poverty line. and that's 6% above the national average.
Many of the people who make this community magical are struggling.
The point is that the people who made Missoula great are the ones increasingly being priced out of the place it's becoming.
I watch this town grow, and I watch it grow every inch. I mean every inch.
We will see a serious loss of security in our streets as lifelong neighbors and childhood friends are replaced with strangers who have no community ties or responsibility to this place.
I am here to speak on behalf of my mother, as well as the rest of the citizens of Missoula that have been rendered homeless by the conditions of the city.
I'm really kind of disturbed looking around and seeing what's going on here.
It's crazy. I left my hometown for 5 years because it wasn't affordable to live here anymore.
A lot of the problems I see happening in this community, I see occurring all over Montana.
I was proud to represent the town that I grew up.
I've seen the damage it's done to my family. I've seen the damage it's done to people I know's family.
Today, I live in a different Missoula. The buildings are growing taller, and the land is growing smaller.
With each new high-rise development, we lose our big sky.
We have a brewery and a bunch of other things for privileged white folks to go hang out at and buy a beer and sit and enjoy themselves, but we don't actually have places where people live.
The UN Bureau of Business and Economics found these problems in Missoula with income disparity and with homelessness and with housing shortages is being greatly exacerbated by your neoliberal policies.
The decisions, the rationale to actually implement some of these destructive policies in the name of economic growth.
Forget that big money. We got problems down here.
Most of the world condemns ethnic cleansing. Do you know what Missoula does? Economic cleansing.
The people who live here were a bit shell-shocked and are now beginning to see how and why this is happening.
And this is just a parcel of gentrification.
What currently is affordable housing and what you guys are going to turn into unaffordable housing.
Which is what we are trying to do in this town in order to increase our housing stock.
Are you sure about that? It's amazing to me how the city council is going out of its way to defend WGM against the community. That's amazing to me. Just wanted to point that out.
Forgive my hoarseness. I've been screaming into a cold, uncaring void for the last several months. Speaking of which, we sure have been seeing a lot of each other.
Been ignored.
And for that reason, I'm supporting it.
Been ignored.
So I'm in favor of it.
Because we're being ignored.
What do you serve? You, as a city council, have been kind of bargained with, even threatened with a lawsuit.
This process has created a public display of conflicting values.
What is the point of public comment if you guys have already made up your minds?
You guys ignored us.
Really discouraging and utterly disappointed to hear that all of you have your mind made up when there's still public comments to be had and then there's still new information to be presented.
Who do you serve?
Tonight, listening to the group of you and the citizens that have come who are not being paid, the community you see today has been built upon by many of the people in this room who are speaking against us.
These people are all right. Every one of them are right. I mean it.
These people are all here to voice the will of the people and what they feel. And if you do represent their interests, like we keep trying to reaffirm to you, please do.
But I have to weigh the needs of a few against the needs of a greater community of over 70,000 people that is continuing to grow.
Ms. Anderson, thank you finally for so honestly admitting that you're not interested in what the public has to say, leaning instead on the opinions of the other 75,000 people who aren't here tonight and probably have no idea what's going on.
There's a logical fallacy in saying, because I didn't hear from them, everybody supports it. You know, there's a logical fallacy in that, because that doesn't hold water.
Out of all the people that have spoken, you had one person speak in favor of what you're doing.
And the public are not really a bunch of crybabies. We have legitimate concerns for public safety, values in our neighborhood.
And measuring your wants and your needs against a much larger community and what is better and what is needed.
So thank you for telling the truth that money talks and public comment walks.
To determine if you guys can't see how many people are objecting to this,
And so maybe you need the whole city to vote on this issue.
We don't want to be a small Austin, nor do we want to be a small Portland.
Density can go in, and it's going in, and it has a huge impact on a neighborhood.
As I look at it, the proposed condos look a little more like noxious weeds than native plants to me.
I personally believe in creating density in the right places.
This is why Missoula housing is already less affordable than Denver, Seattle, Portland, and Miami. This is why.
If we can afford to build luxury condos, we can afford to establish rent controls and tax breaks for longtime resident homeowners, business owners alike.
Resist the forces of gentrification.
We can do better.
City Council and the mayor can do better.
What started with me accidentally finding about a rescheduled meeting, showing up, it was a spark.
John, I recall you saying that you were trying to get ahead of the rumors. That was some months ago. I believe this is what you earned by trying to get ahead of the rumors.
It was like throwing, sparks onto a pile of magnesium. And it just went whoosh! And so these meetings were being just packed at the city council.
Obviously, the amount of people that showed up here tonight and are speaks louder than words.
Here I have a petition. You'll find 318 signatures of those that are in opposition.
Which is a majority.
And I hope you will take that with you tonight and for the rest of the year.
It's a majority of the people in this town that, according to these economic studies, are cost burdened.
And that's a little better than 3 minutes, Mr. Hunt. So here's the thing, folks. I appreciate the passion in the room, but let's not yell from the audience. Let folks at the microphone have their piece, and you'll have yours as well. Got to try to maintain a little decorum. I get it, but we're trying to conduct a little business here, and you all have an opportunity to speak. So, other general public comment this evening.
Hi, my name is Prairie Wolf, I'm a citizen of the city of Missoula. With all due respect, Mayor John Engen, I don't think you do get it. You said that you respect the passion that's in the room, but frankly, there's a lot of people in this room who are afraid to lose their housing. They're afraid to lose their city. They're afraid to lose their community. And they're here with really, really fiery, deep passion because those things affect their safety. It affects their ability to live a healthy life, a happy life, to be able to make money and function and be with their community who supports them. And so I understand that it's maybe a little bit frustrating to have people out here who are supporting the speakers, but that's because we are in a position of losing our homes.
I think it's telling that we now have 211 signatures on 142 petitions from citizens who want City Council to say no to that motion.
But I do urge the council to vote no.
Vote no on the rezoning of the area.
Vote no on the vacation right away.
And actually say no. Don't be afraid to say no.
You just have to say no. That's all you have to do.
So please, don't vote for this.
Do the right thing for once. For once. Don't vote yes on every single thing that gets handed to you.
Councilman Hess, I won't shut up about it. You told me directly that the council does not automatically say yes to all developers.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Hess.
Thanks. Mr. West earlier in his comments mentioned that it's apparent that council doesn't always automatically say yes to developers, and I'd like to say that council never automatically says yes to developers.
Hess votes yes. Hess votes yes. Hess votes yes.
Councilman Hess, you commented in response to one of my comments that the city does in fact not automatically approve all suggested proposals of developers. I think as long as citizens keep pressure on them that it is possible to create change. If there's any public benefit from this development whatsoever, I'd be very curious to hear what it is.
Good things. An innovative tool that get better development out of developers. Other important aspects of development.
Most of you had somewhat arbitrary things to say that are not part of the city zoning code that requires findings of fact.
Responsible growth, orderly and predictable development, diverse housing choices, finding common ground to make a good development, and I think that's what we've got here, and I'm happy to support the motions.
Despite all evidence to the contrary, we've maintained a belief that the council can do better than they do. Councilman Hess has assured me directly that the council does not automatically say yes to developers. We've yet to see any evidence of that in practice.
And you guys know better, so I'm asking you to be better.
All of the people who have come before you oppose this.
How many people from the community do you think are here to support this project?
Nobody's supporting this. And I think that should speak to you.
This is low-hanging fruit, sir. If you're going to say no, this is the time.
Mr. Hess.
Thanks. That's been a thing that has come up a lot tonight is say no, say no.
Council must say no.
But please, vote no.
N-O. That's what you need to do. You need to have backbone.
There's a useful thought exercise in looking through what happens if we say no.
This project has ubiquitous public disapproval.
It appears that it's hard for city council members to say no.
Hess votes yes. Hess votes yes. Hess votes yes.
Quite plainly, I'm just asking all of you, what are you doing? Really?
I think we have made a lot of substantial progress on affordability. We've gone from 0 units to 4 units, which is, well, bear with me for a moment. We've gone from 0 to 4, which is a number that cannot even be quantified with a percentage because 0 is not something that is a divisor.
4 units that are affordable. I'm sure that when that was uttered, there was cheering among the 500 homeless school children in this town. There's such great progress is being made.
The existing buildings already provide 7 units of affordable housing.
And even the 4 designated affordable housing units that we heard discussed tonight is, as many have said, a net loss of affordable housing on this parcel.
We have been working hard to get to that number.
Which means that while the council's #1 goal was to provide affordable housing from this project, the net gain is -3 units of affordable housing.
Affordable housing. Affordable housing, that phrase is like, we're going to give you access to health care. Access for whom? Affordable for whom?
Everybody's talking about affordable rent. Just let me say, it takes half of my monthly income just to live where I'm living.
High-end condos, though, are not going to help the median home price in Missoula. It's only going to push it up further.
In fact, replacing housing at the bottom end of the market with high-end housing at the top end of the market, by definition, raises the median price in Missoula, which is the metric we use to measure affordability.
One of the 5 big ideas in the downtown master plan is a downtown for everyone, noting, quote, affordable living and rentable building space for everyone.
If that's the council's primary goal, how can they consider this public benefit?
This proposal hurts people of our community and it rips away from our history to benefit a few rich that are only going to be there for part of the year.
Because people who are working Missoula wages can't afford those units.
The new building wouldn't cater to anyone but the few wealthy locals and out-of-staters that would likely only stay in their unit for part of the time and then rent it out on sites like Airbnb for the rest of the year.
So this appears to take us further away from the goals of making Missoula more affordable.
Do you understand why people don't believe you?
And then your deeds, what you do, is just oxymoronic.
You say one thing and you do another.
The bigger issue that I want to speak to is really how Missoula is growing and what we as a community are going to do about it.
We're not ignorant to the fact that Missoula is going to grow.
Some growth may be inevitable, but not all growth is great. Some growth is cancerous.
Many of us are not opposed to positive development, but when it removes our city's history and displaces community members, it is no longer positive.
This massive amount of change has turned over in a very short period of time.
In just that 3.5 years that I've been here, there has been rapid change in the neighborhood.
We who oppose projects such as this are sometimes told in a patronizing tone, aping understanding, well, change is hard.
It's easy to assert that change is just inevitable when it's someone else that has to move as a direct result of your greed.
The reason that this has gotten this far is beyond all of us.
I think it's a blatant attempt to make lots of money, and that seems to be kind of the modus operandi now in Missoula.
I know you all think that developers get rich and their consultants get richer. It's simply not a fact. Every one of these projects has this. I'm not getting paid for stand-up, Mr. Mayor.
Nick Kaufman behind me from WGM Group.
WGM needs a rezone. Every time Kaufman comes before you guys, it's to ask to not play within the existing rules. It's to say, hey, I need you guys to change the rules.
I'm an employee and a shareholder in WGM Group. I've been completely open about this from the time I decided to run for this office. In the interest of avoiding conflict of interest, I have recused myself from voting each and every time an item has come in front of this body that involves my employer.
And WGM.
That modeling was done by WGM, who is also working with Nick.
WGM, I'm starting to think, is Western gentrification machine.
I'm not voting on this item on the consent agenda because it involves a contract with WGM Group. Likewise, I will not be voting on the items on the committee reports that will be heard towards the end of our meeting tonight.
Why can't WGM and your clients play by the existing laws, just go with the existing zoning?
That's what we want. We want diversity of different income levels in our neighborhoods. That's a good thing.
WGM senior planner Nick Kaufman behind me says the condos are aimed at a diverse population. The reason that this crowd is laughing when we hear that is because the only diversity are the kinds of millionaires that are going to move here.
I think it's laughable. To say that we're housing diversity is just, it's laughable.
And it's not credible. It's ridiculous.
It's absurd. It's absurd that we're even discussing it. It's absurd that we're discussing any of this.
It's not. It is benefiting a very few amount of people that are rich and wealthy, and we're gentrifying a college town that has nearing 11,000 students. It doesn't make sense.
Is this the kind of Missoula that we want to leave our children? Technocratic utopia where the wealthy spit on the poor.
And put in the people of Missoula underneath.
Don't you have an obligation and responsibility to all Missoulians, and not just the wealthy and well-to-do?
Is downtown and the riverfront a place only for the wealthy to live?
There's a myth that if somebody comes into Missoula and they have enough money to buy a bunch of real estate, there's this mythology that they're entitled to that change by you.
Don't change the rules so some wealthy elite can destroy another neighborhood of working-class Missoulians.
Why are we now allowing someone else to come in and destroy this portion of the South Side?
The powers that be are perhaps a little more vulnerable to making decisions that we may all come to regret later.
You're providing a net loss of affordable housing. This project is antithetical to your own goals.
I want to start by saying that I'm crossing a friend and a coworker and many neighbors in making this motion. I live 2 blocks from this area. I walk my dog by your house.
I believe there were 700 people that spoke out against the development at 4th and Ronald, and we were just given the answer that it was just going to happen.
I want you to know that despite the fact that I'm voting against your interests, I hear you, and I think it's really important, and I think there's a lot of community conversations that flow out of this that we need to continue having.
Okay, on the ordinance to rezone, Hess.
Voting against your interests.
Hess votes yes. Jones. Jones votes yes. Merritt. Merritt votes yes. Sherrill. Sherrill votes yes. Vasika. Vasika votes yes. Van Lossberg. Van Lossberg votes yes. West. West votes yes. Anderson. Anderson votes yes. Becerra. Becerra votes yes. And Contos. Contos votes yes. Would any of you like to change your vote? There's 10 ayes and 2 absent.
It seems like a reoccurring theme here at City Council.
It may seem unfair.
And I find it pretty disgusting.
I am deeply saddened by the decisions being made for Missoula that seem to be overlooking the needs of its people.
A lot of this policy that we're adopting throughout Montana is actually a violation of Montanans' rights.
I once called this town my home. Now I've lost that connection.
Rights protected in Article 9, Section 1 of the Montana State Constitution.
My heart is broken.
It's going to make it harder for people.
I didn't think it was possible for Missoula to sell her soul.
You added 5% of affordable housing, which we learned is a farce.
Spot zoning like this is only allowed if you can prove public benefit, and the only thing that you've got is affordable housing to meet that requirement.
The stated public good here
is affordable housing.
Over and over again about affordable housing.
It's that we would be saying no to any affordable housing.
Affordable housing.
It creates affordability that is permanent, that is deed restricted.
6 more apartments or whatever is not going to fix affordable housing at all.
Certainly, this will not lead to an affordable neighborhood for the people that actually live in this neighborhood. It will lead to the exact opposite.
Every single time you cram in just a little bit more affordable apartments, it's not making it more affordable.
You are indirectly displacing the residents of that block.
We have an affordable housing issue in this community.
If the city council was really trying to help affordable housing and not just pander to real estate developers, then they would ban Airbnb and VBRO on new units.
When they stand up to speak in favor of affordable housing, you're hearing that as support for this project because your position is that this provides affordable housing.
You guys are all talking about 20% affordable housing. It could be 0.
You had the opportunity to close the loophole that would make this provide 0 affordable housing, and you did not close that loophole.
As a B zone, it could be no housing whatsoever. It could be all business.
It's very telling that you all have so conspicuously avoided talking about this and instead have chosen to talk about the one aspect of this that makes it legal, the affordable housing requirement, which has already been articulated, is total nonsense. There's no way you can enforce that.
They can just make the rental units voucher preferenced. And as some of you, including Councilman Hess, acknowledged in committee discussion, that voucher preference has a lot less teeth than the deed restriction.
The priority here is having these affordable housing units.
Every time somebody comes up here and says, we need affordable housing, you're going to hear them in support of this project, and that is not what is happening here. This project does not provide affordable housing the way that you have let it pass through your committees.
They're probably not going to be able to afford the places that are going to be built on top of where they're living now.
So they blame the affordable housing crisis, and it is true that a lot of people are wanting to come to Missoula. Missoula's been discovered. It's been discovered, and we have all these wealthy people moving in, and they don't know why Missoula's being discovered so much. Oh, I wonder, maybe it's because you guys give millions of dollars of tax money to tourism-based industries, like they have the BID, the Tourism Business Improvement District, where the job of it is they collect $2 a night from hoteliers for every room. They collect $2 a night. They fund Destination Missoula, and Destination Missoula's sole job is to advertise and get Missoula. They're selling Missoula with tax dollars.
It's growing because Destination Missoula taxes local hoteliers to advertise Missoula's real estate to wealthy people in other states. That's a big, big reason why people are coming here in droves who are a certain class.
The affordable housing that is on this lot that we are talking about is market rate.
Gwen, you said it's going to be at market rate and affordable. How can it be both market rate and affordable if market rates are already unaffordable?
I also want to say that if there are 48 units to be built, doing the math tells me that if there are 8 affordable units, that implies that there are 40 unaffordable units.
This right-of-way vacation is a tool to create a more sustainable and more structurally equitable tool for generating affordable housing options in our community.
Their ultimate visions might be different, but right now, they all have the same goal. They want to be heard.
There's no malice on their end. It's a disconnect. At the time, what I said to her was that I didn't think there was any real malice, so much as a disconnect, like that maybe it's just sort of like these people really just don't kind of get it. You know, they're not around poverty enough to really understand what it is, how prevalent it is, and how really sort of easily they could mitigate it now that they've got the authority, the ability to do it, and the means to do it. You know, for example, $16 million goes a long way when you're just trying to basically feed and house people. That's all you really need to mitigate half the issues.
And we want to see these problems solved. We don't want to be in perpetual conflict, wasting all of our time coming down here and trying to discover what exactly is wrong with policy that is translating into suffering for so many people.
I know the city has the resources to create the structure to help the community back on its feet. Why does it seem like they're being used against us?
This neighborhood, if you gentrified, 6 more units is not going to fix that. It's not.
They want rid of a certain class of people in this town. They want them gone or out of sight or whatever.
I wish things could be different, but the answers lie in the people who are in power to make the decisions that run our lives.
He gets the vote of the city council to destroy these people's lives.
Is a violation of Montanans' rights.
I've heard it over and over.
And basically forcing them to now consider moving from this.
Anybody that would fight against this is, by default of the issue itself, forced out. They can't stay and fight, unless they want to live in the street. And we're coming to a point where now it's like, you can't live here. You know what I mean? If you lose the place you're in and you can't magically double your income overnight, see ya. Good luck.
They're trying to make ends meet. They're barely making it. They're donating blood. They're doing anything they can to make things work.
By your actions, you have no concern for these people's homes, their neighborhoods, their way of life.
There's an easy solution to this problem, right? Just leave it.
I'm not just saying it for myself. I'm saying it for so many people I know.
We decided that as neighbors 20 years ago. We decided it as a city 10 years ago. We tried to protect it with our historical society.
Well, we aren't going to be able to claim that historic title for much longer if we keep tearing down our historic structures.
I think it would be wise, actually, that the City of Missoula government take a look at the entire growth plan now.
All of this is in the growth policy. These are goals and priorities outlined in the growth policy.
Consider if it is wise to be an ICLEI city. This is why this is happening.
I fear we have been lost somewhere in avaricious desires.
This is the sustainable development. It's not sustainable development for the people of Missoula. Far from it.
Because higher density development is in the growth policy that overrides all of this other stuff.
It may seem like a small vote, but once you do this is the tipping point.
This is criminal.
Please remember, there are humans that need help. If you have the means to help them, I believe it is only human to do so.
These do not serve the best interests of Missoulians.
Maybe people are losing their patience and not trying to waste their time talking to you guys. I'm here to hope that those people are wrong and to hopefully see one of you reconsider this, but I honestly don't have much faith at this point.
These are anti-human policies.
It's really embarrassing, and I would like for the city council to actually step up and actually start saying no to these out-of-state developers that just come out here and just start putting profit in mind before community and the city and the people of Missoula.
They're watching, and you serve at their pleasure, and they are displeased.
Ms. West.
I just briefly, sorry, it's late. Wanted to respond to something I heard early on in public comments, and
I want to especially thank Councilwoman West for her impassioned response during council comment at the end of the marathon meeting.
I think it's entirely unfair to say that people that live in low-income neighborhoods, love where they live less.
I think that some people present might have misinterpreted what you said as a criticism of the working class people who are here to defend their way of life.
I think that the north side and the west side are just as special as the university area or any other part of town.
But, of course, that would be absurd.
And I think it was a very hurtful and classist thing to say.
I want to thank you for standing up for the interests of working people. After all, they are the great majority of your constituency.
And I think that we all value where we live, and some of us have less resources to defend that space.
More pessimistic listeners may have seen your tearful response as a cynical and transparent attempt to distract from the very real concerns of dozens of citizens who over many hours voiced their concerns. But again, I think that's clearly ridiculous. I maintain that you wouldn't do such a thing. You're surely aware that the citizens of Missoula would see right through such tactics. So once again, thank you all. Thank you, Councilwoman West, for your candor and your passion. And thank you all for your diligent service to the people of Missoula. I congratulate you all in advance on doing the right thing and confronting head on the crisis of gentrification that, if not for your watchfulness, would threaten to consume the Garden City.
Controversy after prosecutors charge a Missoula man with threatening the city council. Now, some tell us they're worried the case boils down to one thing: politics.
In December, the Pick Your Battles YouTube page posted a video titled "Brandon Bryant Promises to Eliminate People Over the Next Year."
And you will submit, and you will die.
The man in the video goes on to say he will, quote, hunt down and eliminate members of the Missoula City Council and the United States military.
So the video was discovered and we had a discussion about it, and I thought it was completely inappropriate, and I actually thought that it was appropriate to temporarily bar Mr. Bryant from attending city council meetings from that.
Interim Chief of Police Mike Collier says the police department has issued a written notice of trespass to Bryant, meaning that he can no longer attend public meetings held by the city council.
I assumed, because I always assume this, that there was more to the story than just the video, but nevertheless I thought, okay, let's just calm down, and Brandon, you probably shouldn't show up to council for a couple weeks.
Bryant is banned from contacting any city council member or entering city property.
My friend Brandon was banned from these proceedings forthwith for comments made some time ago.
Because what exactly has happened here?
I understand your reaction. I understand it was more or less his intention to elicit it.
He was just frustrated and he wanted some attention.
And I just noticed in the Missoulian that all it said was that he claimed to be from the Air Force.
The reporter Martin Kidston refers to Staff Sergeant Brandon Bryant as someone who claims to have been in the military.
Bryant claims to be an Air Force veteran.
I suppose that Martin Kidston claims to be a journalist.
So Martin Kidston is a local reporter here in town.
When you call Martin Kidston a reporter or a journalist, and using the term about as loosely as it can be used.
He has his own publication called the Missoula Current, and he was the former spokesman for the Montana Democrat Party before he became a journalist.
I think a journalist might have just looked into that fact to see if he was in the military.
For those of you who don't know, he's an internationally recognized whistleblower.
Because saying he claims to be in the military seems like a fairly inflammatory statement.
Bryant has no criminal record and was honorably discharged from active duty.
That's part and parcel of journalism here in Missoula.
Made it seem like Mr. Bryant had showed up with a sword.
Bryant is well known to city council and law enforcement, and last month brought an apparent weapon to a city council meeting.
I was there, and I didn't remember a sword. I remember him carrying a stick that he always carries around. And that was proved in court that it was in fact a stick. It was not a sword by any stretch of the imagination.
Grasping a bokken, or wooden Japanese training sword in council chambers, he criticized one of the city's taxing mechanisms as an imperfect tool.
Just like if a sword is made incorrectly, this tool that you have at your fingertips, it will end people's lives in ways that are worse than death.
And I believe that a few council members testified to he was rattling it and slamming it down on the table. And I was like, I didn't remember any of that. And then they played the video in court, and it turns out he just came up and set it there and used it to tell a story. So I thought it was ridiculous, the fake news that came out about that, because that does more than just incriminate him on a legal level. It also tries him in the court of public opinion and makes people think that he's guilty of something that he did not do.
But we're lucky. We have two newspapers. Of course, one of them is a failing joke of a newspaper that transparently sandwiches articles that serve its advertisers between those advertisements, and the other is the Missoula Current.
Bryant, an Air Force veteran who says he suffers from PTSD, vociferously opposes the city's tax system that helps fund city redevelopment and infrastructure projects. He says it's siphoning money from taxpayer pockets, gentrifies neighborhoods, and displaces working-class residents.
Over to the U.S. state of Montana, where a total of 4 city council officials have now asked the prosecutor's office to drop charges against whistleblower Brandon Bryant.
I'm the only whistleblower that has, I can't say not faced jail time now, but up until I faced jail time in my own hometown.
Until you came back to Missoula and became active in local politics. How ironic is that?
Actually, that That is super ironic.
Meanwhile, a Missoula man who was banned from Missoula City Council meetings for making threats is now facing formal charges.
Brandon Bryant appeared in court today after making a threatening YouTube video about city council members.
34-year-old Brandon Bryant of Missoula is accused of threatening mass murder. Those threats apparently directed at Missoula City Council members.
The Air Force veteran had been charged with threatening Missoula city officials in a YouTube video. He's currently in detention.
The man at the center of this, Brandon Bryant, in jail on a felony charge of threats and improper influence in official and political matters.
I turned myself in. I didn't think I was going to go to jail for that long. I spent 30 days in jail.
Oh, wow.
The fact that he was even arrested and held in jail for a month because he couldn't afford the bail was the most egregious part, in my opinion.
They set my bail at $100,000.
It was $100,000.
Tonight, Bryant is in jail, held on a $100,000 bond.
That's right.
Which was double the legal limit under the Montana State Constitution.
We asked the county prosecutor why his bail is set at $100,000. We did not get an answer by news time. Brian's supporters started a GoFundMe.
Brandon's mother, though, claims his incarceration is politically motivated.
Politically motivated. And she's launched a campaign in the hope of raising $100,000 for his bail.
My son was the U.S. Air Force whistleblower who broke the code of silence on the drone program. Now he's in jail in the Missoula County Detention Facility. He has no criminal record, and yet he is being held on $100,000 bail. Under detention, he is isolated from his family, from his friends, and from his medically mandated emotional support animal.
As the county attorney's office is deciding to spend their limited resources to prosecute you on felony charges, Sean Stevenson was attacked and his alleged assailant was not charged with anything. He was released from jail after like 48 hours. Around the same time, this kid named Ben Musso was stabbed 4 times in the bathroom and he died. And Kirsten Pabst, our county attorney, decided that the person that stabbed him, that was a justifiable use of force in self-defense. And so he faced no charges.
Felony assault.
Yeah, that contrast, that is, I mean, you can't ignore that juxtaposition.
When someone says you're going to be eliminated, that's a serious thing.
And something Engen has never seen in his almost 15 years as mayor of Missoula.
You cross a line when you make a threat. And it's not about the substance of the criticism, it's about the threat associated with the criticism.
But some people see Bryant's arrest differently. Recently, Bryant has been an outspoken participant at city council meetings, mainly criticizing the city's use of tax increment financing, special tax money used for improvement projects.
I think that the city is making a terrible mistake right now. The optics of this look like he's being punished for speaking out.
Miller questions why Bryant was arrested in February, months after the alleged threatening behavior and video. And he's not alone.
What really got Brandon Bryant in jail is that he leaked to the media a dossier of documents that had been given to him by someone supposedly in the mayor's camp, proving systemic corruption by the mayor and his inner circle. He was given this dossier months ago, told not to go to city council meetings a few weeks ago, and then he leaked these documents. They were published online. 2 days later, he was in jail.
Someone reached out to me via Facebook. He said he was part of Mayor Engen's inner circle, and he had a series of documents that he wanted to be released, but he couldn't do so because it would affect his political career. We all know what happens when you whistleblow. So he said, I will show up at the break, and I will place them in an envelope on the table for you to have. And then I showed up. He was in glasses and a hat and a heavy coat, and then showed me in order. He said, I'm not going to explain it, but I'm going to point out everything to you because it was already, it's already labeled on the dossier, everything's circled. And he pointed to me in order and he said, you can make the connections. So I started looking into it, thinking I can do the investigative journalistic work, but I'm a soldier, not a journalist. And so I decided to do my own research on Jackson Co. and the LLC Maggie Company, but I don't know this guy's name. I don't know his name. But he also definitely said that his political career would be jeopardized if he did it himself.
One of the things that we've been particularly worried about with regards to speaking out about tax increment financing are all of the warnings I'm getting from people who are far more seasoned in politics in this town than I am, who have, since we started getting involved, been warning us about the political retaliations of the Engen regime. It's really important to note this guy with $100,000 bail, this absurdly high bail, has no criminal history and was discharged from the military under honorable conditions. No criminal history, $100,000 bail. That sounds like political retaliation to me.
So if you're concerned about tax increment financing, definitely look into it. But if you want to speak out about it, be careful. Watch your back, because there's political prisoners in Missoula, and they're the ones who are speaking about tax increment financing.
These conversations I've been having with people have spanned since I got elected to council, since I was running for council. People saying, oh, Jesse, you're so brave. If you don't win, you're just going to get destroyed. It goes back to council members Googling people and trying to dig up things to destroy them and ruin their lives. Missoula had cancel culture before cancel culture was even a thing. It's a lot easier to attack somebody's character and their flaws, which all humans have, as opposed to attacking their arguments. And it's really nice when they control the narrative to where their sins aren't considered sinful, but their opponent's sins are considered sinful. And even if it's the same sin, it matters who's saying it. And there's forgiveness if you're with the party. It's very Orwellian.
For the record, this is the last time I'll be addressing you.
I did want to congratulate some of you on your courage and your accomplishments over the following weeks.
I want to congratulate you. I salute you.
I'd like to encourage you on the accomplishment of limiting the First Amendment rights of disabled American veteran to participate in the democratic process.
You've successfully silenced an activist, and in doing so, have sent a chilling message to this community.
That takes serious guts.
This man needs help.
He came home broken.
So obviously this man is very traumatized.
City Attorney Nugent knows all of this, of course, but somehow allowed this story to spin out of control anyway.
Every time this man stands up, internationally, locally, what's he get?
I was warned about the political retaliations of the Engen regime when I started showing up here, and now that I've seen them for myself, I can't help but wonder what more you have planned.
And I just hope you guys get him help instead of trying to ruin his life more than he's already done.
I can't help but wonder how you're planning on silencing me for my part in showing up to these meetings and opposing these TIF giveaways.
This man's made sacrifice for this country, and he's a local hero in my opinion.
But even though I can't help but wonder these things, my family are not so thrilled about the idea of finding out what kind of political retributions you might have in store for me. After all, last week's fear-mongering has created a much greater danger for many of the people I know and love who are being threatened now as a result of this blatant character assassination, one that took place the same day as 2 international publications went live vis-a-vis the drone war.
Really, really amazing.
I can't help but wonder if the military-industrial complex has any roots here in the zoo that could have contributed at all to this fear-mongering against one of the nation's most prominent anti-war whistleblowers.
But former FBI agent and whistleblower Colleen Rowley believes that Bryant's current predicament is connected to his past revelations.
This does seem to be more retaliation for his having spoken out about the drone operations and the fact that they were killing innocent civilians, more so than what he's now done.
Now me and people I know are being targeted because you've chosen to present a cartoonish version of events.
I had to walk away from everything altogether after that. I was, I felt threatened.
You've put people's lives in danger by doing what you've done.
You behaved predictably.
However it works out, I suggest against misconstruing the contents of my comments these past few weeks and months as some kind of call to jihad, the way that you did with Sergeant Bryant.
These threats are being taken very seriously.
It can be traumatizing.
Perhaps the Missoula community has learned in our dealings with this body that our fault was appealing to ethics, something we talk a lot about in this room, but as evidenced by the present state of our city and of course the underhanded tactics in dealing with activists, something we all could learn a lot more about. Perhaps this was not the robust conversation that some of you had imagined.
Robust debate.
Give it a robust process, as Mr. Hess always says.
Because this is apparently how we respond to citizen criticisms of political differences in Missoula, Montana, by shutting down the conversation altogether.
I'm running out of things to say to you people.
I'm taking my leave of acting as a community liaison for your greater constituency at these meetings. It's obviously worthless information anyway, because it's coming from non-millionaires who don't share your ideology, so why even bother voicing it?
I hope you guys can find a way to get them help, and not just ruin them. Thank you.
Thank you, and I believe those efforts are being made. Now, therefore, John Engen, mayor of the city of Missoula in the state of Montana, does hereby proclaim February 11th through the 17th, 2020, in Missoula, Montana, as Superhero of Kindness Week.
I've lived here for 44 years, and I haven't seen this town so messed up since Mayor Engen has taken office. Right now, my wife and I are paying over $4,400 in property tax. I want to know who gave them the right to give our money away in the first place. They're robbing the taxpayers is what they're doing.
TIF money is also affecting county residents. So people in Sealy Lake, people in Frenchtown, people in Lolo, wake up. Part of your tax money is going into these TIF funds that you're never going to see back.
If indeed these men have factual evidence of corruption and using tax money improperly, I appreciate them speaking out and have the courage to speak out. That's what keeps our country free. I appreciate what you're doing. More people need to do this. Thank you for what you do, and keep up the good work.
Thanks,
If
Roy.
indeed everything you say is factual, you're on the right side.
Evidently, it's spilled out over the entire makeup of the city council and how Missoula is governed. So how did you guys get involved in this?
Just people that saw something fishy going on, some shady dealings going on downtown, and went down to speak to the city council about it and have our voices be heard. And what do you know? Now one person who's done that is in jail. Brandon Bryant is a political prisoner. What's got him in jail right now is he started coming down to the Missoula City Council meetings on Monday nights at 7 p.m. and raising his voice and saying tax increment financing is stealing our money and giving it to the rich. He spoke every week for weeks. He was then banned from the council meetings for getting upset, for getting angry about being robbed, about being ignored. And then somebody who claims to work for the mayor gave him a dossier of documents that they claimed showed that the mayor was corrupt and in bed with big business in town. He leaked it to the media. It got published online, and 2 days later he was in jail.
Now let me ask, what about the videos where he supposedly threatens the people at council?
Why is Brandon Bryant in jail? Supposedly it's for issuing threats to the city council, but he didn't send the video in question to city council members. In fact, the video that they got sent wasn't even made by him. He has his own YouTube channel where for years he's posted very long video journals. There's hundreds of hours of those. And you know what? I've met Brandon. His mouth is like an unmanned drone. It just goes on and on. There's no operator, man. He gets started and he says a lot of stuff, and some of the stuff he says is crazy. He's a traumatized veteran. He's got severe PTSD. You can tell. You watch him interact at the city council, it's like some of these vets are messed up, man. And so it's like you can't defend a lot of the things that he says, but he's got hundreds of hours of these video journals, and they're rambling and vague and cryptic. If you find his YouTube channel, which is actually really hard to find, it doesn't have his real name on it. If you find his YouTube channel, there's hundreds of hours of video diaries. And then there's this other YouTube channel run by this guy named Rick Reinierson out of Seattle, whose sole job for the last year seems to be trolling and harassing Brandon Bryant.
My serial stalker is a major in the United States Air Force, right? So he took one of my videos, spliced it together, and sent it to the city council and told them that I was threatening. He edited it, sent it to the city council, and said that I was threatening them, and that's what caused all this. That's what caused this arrest.
And this is because the Mr. Reinierson, who's now been in my social media and sending me messages, edited a video made in a brain injury-induced manic state. It was about 14 or 15 minutes in its totality, whittled it down to about 5, and sent it to you all unbidden, with no explanation, no context. he ended up in jail based on essentially this video, this internet video that had been pieced together.
Every video that he's posted on his YouTube channel for the last year are clips from Brandon Bryant's video journals. And so that's what got sent to the city council. Took one of his videos that's like 14 minutes long, cut it down, took the most inflammatory stuff to provoke fear and create terror, cut that together, and then sent it to the city council. The Pick Your Battles YouTube channel, which is actually mentioned in the Missoulian article this morning as Brandon Bryant's YouTube channel, is not Brandon Bryant's YouTube channel. That's somebody who takes Brandon Bryant's clips, cuts them down to make them more inflammatory, more frightening. That's the person who sent them to the city council. That's the person who threatened the city council.
The court documents prove the fact that they will lie, cheat, and steal to cover this up. They don't do any investigation. They'll use someone else's video. The prosecution relied on my stalker's testimony the whole time in his blog. So they didn't even read the description. Even though they put the description in the court documents of what it is, they didn't even read the whole description.
It's as if I were to take clips of your show, cut them together to have you say, I kidnapped the Lindbergh baby, or I'm going to get you, Donald Duck. And then who's the one who's admitting a crime or making threats? It's not you.
Here's a guy who's being charged with a crime that he did not commit. That sends a chilling message to those of us who have been attending these council meetings, who have seen vociferous outrage about them coming from a lot of people, and especially Mr. Bryant has been the loudest and perhaps least articulate of us, but he has been able to articulate the emotional frustration and rage that accumulates as a result of seeing all the homeless people on the streets of Missoula, all the people who are financially insecure, all the people who are food insecure, people who can't afford their rent. And a lot of that comes down to rising property taxes, rising rents, and a lot of those rents and property taxes that are pricing people out of the area, forcing peoples out of the area, displacing locals. All of that is because the tax base is not being used properly. The reason they have to constantly increase all these property taxes is because all this taxpayer money is being given away to people that don't need it.
Change is not happening because people must like the way things are going.
The way that they prevent the change from happening is by keeping it nice and boring. The members of the council who are politically astute, they ignored all of the TIF activists that showed up there from the get-go. Anytime the public showed up to give public comment on any of these development projects, on any of the service of the super wealthy, the politically astute members of the council would just ignore them entirely because they keep it nice and boring. It's not boring anymore. It's gotten really exciting. Downtown is gripped with lockdowns and militarized police. People even blamed Brandon Bryant for that shooting downtown. He happens to have been in jail at the time. Yes. There was no way it could have possibly been him, but that didn't stop there being wild speculation. That didn't stop the city council having extra special security during that lockdown because they felt under threat.
There is lots of speculation on social media surrounding Wednesday's incident in downtown Missoula.
Actually, I was in city council chambers when we were alerted to the incident.
The Missoula police officer who came close to being shot this morning is shaken up, but okay tonight.
However, his colleagues are still looking for the suspect that opened fire at his patrol car, forcing him to scramble for cover in a nearby building.
It was a shooting that closed a major chunk of downtown for hours, putting the courthouse, city hall, and other public buildings on lockdown.
Informed that a police vehicle had their back window shot out, but I remember sitting there thinking this was just a big joke because they were trying to make us lock down. And I remember getting up to leave and everybody asked me, "Oh, where are you going? It's unsafe out there." And I'm like, "Well, I'm hungry. I'm going to McDonald's." I was under the impression that nobody was in any real danger. And if anything, I thought that somebody might have been an idiot and shot the cop car window because I didn't know any of the details. And I was like, okay, well, we can't be tolerating that. But I never even once thought of Brandon Bryant being the guy and to do it because I think Brandon was in jail at the time.
The rumors that went around really fast. I mean, it was initially reported somebody had shot out the back window of a police car.
Good evening, I'm Jill Valley.
I'm Dennis Bray.
A suspect remains at large tonight after they shot at a Missoula police officer who was driving his patrol car this morning in downtown Missoula.
The shooting happened in the heart of downtown, just off West Broadway near City Hall and the Missoula County Courthouse.
Within minutes, there was a massive lockdown and curfew evacuation of people out of this huge area downtown.
Yeah, they called in from, I think, the nearest 3 cities, SWAT backup, and there was several armored vehicles. There were police cruisers all over around town, assault weapons and dogs and the whole bit. And
and then snipers were placed on the roof of the courthouse, and it was, they thought this was some kind of a terrorist attack or something.
Did they think that the TIF activists were the Al-Qaeda?
Breaking news out of Missoula, shots were fired at a police car being driven by an officer in the city's downtown just hours ago. Officials have now put many downtown buildings under lockdown as an investigation continues.
The rumor going around town was that it was one of our friends that had done it. And the funny thing was, this guy was in jail. He was behind bars. But that rumor had got around, and nobody in a position to put it down was really interested in putting it down.
I believe in the trial it came out that there was, even among Heather Harp, it came to mind that potentially that could have been Mr. Bryant. And Brandon was in jail at the time, but I think the power of their own bias was so strong that they had jumped to all these conclusions. And I think at the end of the day, it wasn't even a bullet. They couldn't find any bullet fragments or anything like that.
At a press conference earlier today, Interim Chief Mike Collier said no bullets, even bullet fragments, had been found after an officer reported his car was shot at.
This just never smelled right. And once it was pretty clear that which should have been within minutes, that no one had taken a shot at that car, that the back window wasn't blown out by a bullet.
In fact, it took quite a long time, given the severity of the response, for the powers that be to give anybody any kind of clarity on what really happened. I'm sure you probably get 10 different stories from 10 different people, and 2 or 3 of them would probably be that our friend went nuts and shot out the window.
Investigators searched the area and x-rayed the car twice, looking for bullet fragments. Almost 2 weeks later, no bullets have been found.
And it's been largely inconclusive.
The back window of the police car, from the cold, it popped out. And it was obvious that no one had shot that back window out, because it didn't break in, it blew out.
Collier added the police force was on edge immediately following this incident.
But the assumption was immediately, someone's taken us out.
You were in jail when some of the craziest parts of all this were happening. So, and that wasn't really known by the public. So it was reported Brandon Bryant, the cause of all of the chaos this past Wednesday, was arrested and taken into custody Thursday, February 13th. Bryant reportedly shot out the back glass of a police patrol car, fired shots outside of City Hall, and posted a video where he said that he would hunt people and exterminate them. So that was a excerpt from a Hellgate Lance article written by Maggie Vann.
Okay, so guess whose child is in the Hellgate Lance class? Gwen Jones's son.
Oh, you're kidding me.
And is friends with the girl that wrote this.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No. Gwen Jones, anytime someone gets up there to speak at city council, she will sit there and look them up and find derogatory information about them and try to fuck with their lives.
So Heather Harp had to testify to that fact, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think what was powerful about Ms. Harp's testimony was she's on the same side of the political aisle as Gwen is, and they actually represent the same ward. So the way the seating arrangement goes is you sit with your ward mate. So she was sitting next to Ms. Jones during that, and I don't think that's what we're supposed to be doing as council members. I mean, I've had people come up and say nasty things to me, and my first instinct is to go up and talk to them and see if they can understand where I'm coming from and try and understand their point of view a little bit more. I've never once thought to Google somebody. I've never been insecure to that point where I think that I have to rely on ad hominem attacks.
One of the things that Gwen Jones found out was the stalker's website, he made a video of me called God, Death, and Children, which accuses me of being a pedophile death cult leader who used the souls of the people I killed to give myself supernatural powers.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean...
that's creative.
Yeah.
And he's the person that edited together videos that you were uploading as a part of your process of sort of dealing with a lot of the things that you've experienced.
Correct.
And then he was the one that actually sent the excerpts to city council members.
Correct. There's a lot of speculation behind it, but we know that there's direct communication between city council members and this guy, whose wife works for Raytheon, the company that got the defense contract for drones.
You were high profile, and you made your yourself basically the target of some people that were not appreciative of the things that you were saying and bringing attention to.
Correct.
I had my own experience with Gwen Jones. When I wrote a poem as a private citizen back in 2018, I didn't realize that Gwen Jones was very passionate about sidewalks and building sidewalks to the tune of thousands of dollars that homeowners were going to be billed for the sidewalks. And so I didn't realize at the time when I submitted this poem to the Missoulian that this was going to cause me some kind of serious interaction with an elected official. But she was a board member of Missoula Aging Services at the time and used that to get me into a room with her and chastise me. I mean, basically chewed me out for writing a poem.
That's abuse of power.
I want to talk about shared understandings. Last week, Ms. Jones responded to someone concerned for Brandon and said that efforts or arrangements, I don't remember exactly, but were being made to get Brandon help.
Thank you, and I believe those efforts are being made.
24 hours later, less than 24 hours later, Brandon was in jail.
The kind of terrible irony of it was that once everything came to a head with Brandon and he ended up in jail, one of the things they said was that they wanted to help him. I don't know. It just feels kind of like an extra little slap in the face. You want to help him, huh?
And being charged with what amounts to terrorism, looking to exact undue influence through fear in a political matter. It's the textbook definition of terrorism.
There was definitely fear. It was a pretext to put on a massive display of institutional force. They arrested him and they did all this stuff, but this was the atmosphere then. I think they were trying to send a message to the activists.
Now you say this is Brandon's crime. And you have him locked up for it right now. As the so-called threatened parties, you could end this tomorrow. You could go and say you recognize the threats for what they are, okay? But you don't.
We're at 3 minutes, Mr. Woodall.
Give me just 30 more seconds. You don't because it's not about Brandon. It's about sending a message. Anyone who stands up like he did will get the same kind of help you arranged for him. That's what I'm afraid of now. That's why none of my friends are here. We're afraid of you.
What if we're not going to take the personal attacks on council members or the inaccuracies around this? So I was particularly upset about the last part of public comment where there was an accusation that actions by a member of council had played any role whatsoever in an arrest. It's absolutely false.
We had absolutely nothing to do with putting anybody behind bars.
Jem Nugent did this, and Gwen Jones did this, and Brian von Lossberg. One of the documents says that it was Brian von Lossberg and Gwen Jones who approached the police department for safety training in mid-January.
Von Lossberg then discovered what he describes as disturbing YouTube videos featuring Bryant. One is titled, "I Would Be Justified in Going on a Killing Spree." In another, Brandon Bryant promises to eliminate people over the next year. That video and others like it prompted Von Lossberg and his council colleagues to alert city police. A few days later, Missoula police referred the case to the county attorney's office. Bryant was arrested Tuesday and now faces a felony.
I got Officer Smith's report from my lawyers. Before he even talked to me in the end of January, he talked to the city council, one of the lawyers, Susan Boyle. And so what she did was just have him go to St. Pat's Hospital so that we can involuntarily commit him.
That was
it says it in the thing. And get this, so when I first had my conversation, sit-down talk with Officer Ethan Smith, he asked me if I would go to St. Pat's Hospital, and I said, no, I go to the VA for my mental health. Saved me, just that little thing. But then the night I got that report, after I'd spoken to my lawyer, I got mail at the jail. And as I'm opening it up to see what it was, another little slip fell out. And it says, they want to involuntarily commit you and transport you. I had this note. And it was from a guard. I don't know who it was. But then I immediately flushed it. And later that night, they did a shakedown of my room, of the whole thing. That was kind of a weird, terrifying moment. And then they put me in isolation.
So I went and I said, you know, it's pretty absurd to put someone in jail based on a pieced together internet video.
Last week I came and professed a spiritual commitment to nonviolence. I want to start by saying first, and a little more directly than Dan did, nothing I am saying here or ever have said or will say here, publicly, privately, anywhere, should be taken as a call to violence of any kind. I'm a person of peace. I'm a Christian. I'm committed morally and spiritually to nonviolence. And before I had returned to my seat, I was accused of levying a personal attack by a man who now won't even look me in the eye. And the next morning, I found in the Missoula Current an article saying that I had confessed to sending the video that Brandon was arrested for. I was mortified. I ran to my computer and I looked up the video thinking I had terribly misspoken somehow.
What Martin Kiston wrote was that I came to the city council and confessed to sending the video which had gotten Brandon arrested, which the way I took it was that they understood they had made a big mistake arresting a guy on essentially hearsay, and they were looking for a fall guy.
Nothing in my statement could be construed as a personal attack or an admission of any kind by anyone with even a basic grasp of the English language, unless they had intentionally misheard me.
No one with a basic grasp of the English language could understand anything that I said to be a confession of any kind.
And I am afraid now. I'm afraid because there are things being just blatantly made up about me and put out in the press.
Called up a friend of mine, a lawyer friend of mine, and he said, "You got a slam dunk libel suit." So I said, "Okay, I got a phone call to make." And I said, retract the story or you're gonna have a problem.
I had to call and threaten this man with a lawsuit to get him to retract. He did quickly. I think he knew what he'd done.
If you're gonna be writing hit pieces about me, I don't have so much skin in this game that I need to be putting myself at hazard here yet. I'll leave you alone, you leave me alone, everything will be fine.
I'll leave you alone. Please leave me alone.
And I left. And Martin Kiston followed me out the door. And I'm beginning to get a grasp for how he understands the English language. Because, the week before I'm saying, you can't put somebody in jail for a random internet video.
Right.
And he understands that as me saying, I sent you the video, so you'd put him in. And then I say, leave me alone, and he follows me.
I said I had a personal commitment to nonviolence. It was taken for a personal attack. I explained the provenance of the video. It was asserted then that I had admitted to sending the video, and then I asked to be left alone, only to be followed out the door by the man who had written that article. Oh, well, guys, I'm a little discouraged as to whether we're even speaking the same language anymore.
He says, hey, Matt, I'm sorry about the misunderstanding and blah, blah, blah. What I said to him at the time is, a misunderstanding maybe, but, don't report drunk. I can smell the liquor on your breath, man. To misunderstand what I said, you either have to be willfully, intentionally twisting what I said, or drunk, or mind-bogglingly stupid. Those are the options.
And shame on Kidston for this dishonest coverage.
An ongoing issue is how often does he misunderstand something to that degree in his official capacity as the reporter for the city council chamber,
Martin from the Current reminded me that we have a really great opportunity to model respectful dialogue and debate founded on a basis of facts.
Unfortunately, Martin Kidston wrote for the Missoula Current, the new conservative voting bloc on the Missoula City Council tried but failed Wednesday to prevent TIF from being used to open a healthcare clinic at the food bank.
So just as a note, the food bank item is in the committee reports later in the agenda, and there'll be an opportunity to comment.
I didn't. The only point I was making is that if Mr. Kidston was interested in journalism, he would not have so conspicuously smeared Jesse Ramos, who said out loud, plain as day, for everyone who was here to hear him, that he and his so-called conservatives support the project. They don't support the TIF funding for it. And as I just mentioned, neither do I.
Anybody stands up, he comes and writes his piece.
And you won't have to hear about Brandon from me again. You'll probably be hearing about him from other folks. See the posters around town, maybe.
I wanted to read a letter that I wrote. Dear Brandon, I just wanted to let you know that I'm thinking about you. Thinking about how sorry I am that this is where you are. I hope the charges are dropped. Criminal justice reform is hard work, and if I don't fight for you, then who?
Ms. Jones.
The jury came back so fast with your acquittal. I mean, it seemed from just the speed in which that acquittal happened that there was an acknowledgement that you were being politically persecuted for your activism.
Well, I think that it was actually TIF that was on trial that day. I don't think that it was Brandon necessarily. I think there are a lot of things on trial that were not Brandon Bryant, and I'm very glad to see the verdict that was delivered and delivered so swiftly by a jury of Mr. Bryant's peers. Because I think that it was TIF that was on trial. I think that most importantly it was free speech that was on trial. I think that it was the protected political speech that was on trial. I think it was political expression and public participation in political matters that was on trial. And I think all of those were at risk. And I think to a certain extent they still are, because I know a lot of people, both Democrats and Republicans, that are afraid to run for office, to come down to speak to city council. I hear it on almost a daily basis of people, well, I'd run for office, but if I don't win, then I'd have all these different people. I mean, I have a business in Missoula. I have employees in Missoula. My employer wouldn't like it if I ran for council. I mean, there's just so many things working against people publicly participating.
I talk with officials with both the city and the county all the time, and it never ceases to amaze me that the entire county can be run by 3 county commissioners, right? And yet we need 12 city councilors and a mayor.
You know, I think that the Missoula City Council needs so many members so that you can really feel not listened to. It's when the public goes down there to have 12 faces staring blankly back at you while you scream into an uncaring void. There's just nothing like it. It's a really terrific audience to be ignored by.
Well, I hate to say that, but that sounds really sad, you know?
It would be if the things that we laughed about weren't the things that are too terrible to cry about. So you may think it's sad, but it's actually hilarious.
So why don't you run for office? Why don't you run for city council or mayor? Because to effect change, don't you have to try to be inside the system working for change?
The citizens are inside the system. The citizens are an absolutely essential part of the system. The reason that we don't run for city council and that we don't run for mayor is that we would like them to do their jobs. They've already been elected to do it. They're absolutely capable of doing it. They have the knowledge. They just don't have the motivation unless the citizens come down there and talk to them every single day. And the citizens have done this. There's been a huge groundswell of citizen support. People started coming to the city councils in the hundreds. One of them in December went until 2 a.m. Right. There were so many people there to speak.
When you ignore local issues, you're doing yourself an incredible disservice. Local issues are where you can have an impact just by showing up to council chambers or county commissioners meetings or school board meetings. That's where more and more people need to focus.
I felt proud of the city of Missoula's response, not the city government, but the people, right? The people's response. Because all of a sudden, there's more people at the city council meetings than has ever been. Like, that's their response. And we did it. Not me. We did it.
They have not managed to keep it boring. The public started coming in, the public started paying attention, and you know what? It got exciting, and that's when the change is going to happen.
And, you know, this isn't going to be easy, of course. The fight is just beginning. But we've seen now where the battle line... Who said this? Wasn't it Gwen Jones that says the battle lines are drawn? Yeah, we see now.
Their reaction, how hard they came down on us just for kind of showing up, says a lot more about, you know, who they are and how they think and operate than anything we ever said.
Public participation has absolutely plummeted from that day forward. From his arrest forward, it has plummeted. One thing that I will agree with the mayor on is that he often says that he hears all these complaints about issues, but he never sees anybody down in council chambers. And I agree with him on that we don't have enough citizen participation. Now, we make it a lot harder when we move meetings around, helter-skelter, various things like that, but at the end of the day, I would like to see a lot more citizen engagement like we saw.
Well, I hope they make it public again, because as it stands, if you don't have a computer and an internet connection, you're not considered part of the public anymore.
A hometown guy like John Engen, as legitimate as his claim to being a hometown guy is, after 16 years, what he has actually demonstrated feels like a betrayal and a sellout.
Oh, yeah, he's a traitor.
So we worked really hard, and that felt like a betrayal.
Thank you, Ms. Jacobs.
They ruined my home. I can't even live here.
Please stand with me and say aye if you want the city council to send Hillview Crossing back to the drawing board.
We've done that once. We don't need to do it again. Yeah.
I think everybody will. Come on, aye!
Yeah, rebellion. Anyone else care to speak this evening?
You get what you voted for. As long as you keep reelecting this mayor and you keep reelecting the council members, this is the kind of politics you're going to get. If he keeps getting reelected, this is what you're going to get.
What does a bear do in the woods? Any damn thing it wants to.
He's an enormously popular mayor. Okay, he's very self-effacing. He's very personable. When you get that combination, it's a difficult combination to beat politically, especially when there are so few people who are willing to run against him. He is the linchpin of everything that happens in Missoula, and it's a very powerful position. And I don't know who could run against him and win. I really don't.
But when you're talking about why would somebody not want to go for city council or the mayor, there have been people who have run up against the mayor and it ends up turning into, oh my goodness, you had a past and got a divorce. There was a really nice lady who ran for mayor, and it turned into about her divorce and her children, instead of the fact that she just wanted to run for mayor and it had nothing to do with her personal life. She wanted to have a different voice on the council, and they tore her apart personally. So why would anyone want to go through that?
That's well put.
I find it hard to believe that everybody running against Mayor Engen is just this horrible, awful person. But I think there's so many people that worship him as this deity, and in addition to that, there's so many people whose livelihoods depend on Mayor Engen being in office.
In a tragic twist of irony, Brandon Bryant would later turn against the very people who stood up for him when he was in jail. After more than a month behind bars for threats he never made, Bryant began threatening his own friends with violence, threats he would later clarify as promises. To the great advantage of those in power, Bryant slandered all of his former activist allies, libeling their names online, while claiming that it was he who had been betrayed, isolating himself from the very people who had comforted his crying mother during his incarceration, who set up the GoFundMe for his bail, who raised hell in local media for his release.
You talked about Matt Wardell earlier.
Yeah.
I don't have any respect for the guy, honestly, after what happened, because when I got put in jail and everything, all those people just abandoned me across the entire board. Where is my local support? Where is it?
If Brandon's former allies were really interested in betraying him, as he constantly claims, then they would have presented this incontrovertible evidence of assault, threats, and defamation to prosecutors when he was facing prison time. But they didn't. And remember Bryant's so-called internet troll? It turns out he isn't quite as two-dimensional as we may have been led to believe. It turns out that Major Rynierson, who served alongside Bryant in the drone program, actually disobeyed a shoot order against an American citizen as unconstitutional, a decision that earned him UCMJ legal action as a result. A decision that separates him from Bryant in a highly significant way. The fact remains, the 5-minute video sent to the council would not have existed in the first place without the original, equally unflattering, 13 or so minutes. If you thought that this was a simple story of heroes and villains, think again. The world's a lot more complicated than all of that. But the real tragedy is the fact that whatever progress Missoula's concerned citizens were able to make towards a greater understanding of tax and spending abuses in their community has since been completely smothered by a temper tantrum that has worked in favor of those in power ever since.
You are that rich man!
Whatever this movement might have accomplished, had Bryant never screamed at the mayor, we'll never know. But everything that's transpired since perfectly exemplifies the myriad of strategies employed to neutralize populist movements. First and foremost among them, the principle of divide and rule. Those who love their communities must learn to organize as effectively as those addicted to profit now threatening to destroy those communities. If movements are ever to succeed against the forces of exploitation, these are some of the hurdles that we can all expect along the way. In the end, for any of this to change requires your participation. It's up to you.